Story 1.
I exposed my cheating wife's affair by sending surprise evidence boxes to her family and friends. Hope you have time and a snack, as this story is quite extensive, covering events from late 2019 to last week. Following the rules, all names are altered. Here's the backstory. My soon-to-be ex-wife was my high school sweetheart. We began dating in 1992 at the age of 17, and at 45 we're still together. She's the only woman I've ever been with, and we got married at 22, right after college. A year later, our first of two children, both boys, 22 and 17, came into our lives. I dedicated 23 years to her, building a house and working tirelessly to provide the life she wanted. Despite inevitable rough patches in any marriage, we always found a way to overcome challenges, making the discovery of her affair even more shocking. Let's go back to March 2020, when I first sensed something was off. For the preceding 2 months, we were in a funk. I was recovering from reconstructive knee surgery. I blew out my ACL in fall 2019, still limited in movement with only about 55% range of motion. This took a toll on various aspects of our life. On workers' comp due to a job-related injury, I couldn't handle my usual household duties, resulting in a backlog. While my sons helped where they could, tasks only I could manage had to be postponed, or my wife had to step in, which displeased her. Things also came to a standstill in the bedroom between us. It had already slowed down before my injury, but in my then state it completely stopped. During these months, Shalate's call her Sue spent more time hanging with Keo workers after work. From November 2019 to March 2020, it was a regular occurrence. Naturally, I thought nothing of it given the 23 trust-filled years we'd shared. Sue and I had our own friends, and we also had mutual ones. I used to hang out with my friends frequently without any issues. Everything was above board. Around January of this year, however, I noticed something odd. Sue started becoming noticeably distant. While we were in a funk, she had never denied me affection to that extent. The usual hugs and kisses came to a halt. Her phone, which was always in her hand, became a source of suspicion, as she was now guarded about it. Even her interactions with me became more snippy, as if she couldn't be bothered. Fast forward to March. COVID has arrived, and New York City is in lockdown. Our chosen careers are deemed essential, so we don't have to work from home. Having recently been cleared to return to work after 5 months, I was eager to get back into action. 5 months on my back, rehabbing my knee, and being unable to engage in physical activities had driven me nuts. For context, I enjoy physical activities. I am an avid martial artist, typically hitting the gym 4 days a week, in addition to all the home projects I tackled. Within a week or two of the lockdown, my STBXW informs me that she'll have to start putting in extra hours. Once again, I think nothing of it due to her field. I assumed it would be every other day, but no, it was every day, and not just for an hour or two. She would come home 3 or more hours later, go straight to the shower, spend a little time with me, a little time with our 17-year-old, the 22-year-old lives with his GF across town, and then go to bed. As I became more adept at supporting myself on my knee, our copulation resumed. However, as you would probably guess, she wasn't mentally or emotionally present for it, a fact I noticed quickly. By early April, the situation became clearer to me. All signs pointed to the idea that she was having an affair. That's when I decided I needed to find answers. I scoured the internet for signs of infidelity, and she was pretty much ticking all the boxes on such behavior. My search then advanced to how I could find proof. I started with her social media, looking at her Facebook entries from months prior, which were pretty much the usual. They included pictures of us and our sons, pictures with her friends, and quite a few of her nights out with coworkers. In these pictures, there's a mixed bag of her closest friends from work, along with a couple of people I've never met from her workplace. But one recurring thing caught my eye. In many of these pictures, one guy, in every photo has uncomfortably close to her, with his arm around her shoulder or his hand on her lower back. Way too close for a guy I've never personally met. Needless to say, that put a sour taste in my mouth. But that wasn't the worst of it, no. The worst part was the fact that apparently this guy is a friend of hers on Facebook and follows her on Instagram. So I go to look up his Facebook account and wouldn't you know it, I am blocked. Why the heck am I blocked from seeing this guy's Facebook account, but has friends with her on Facebook? Yep, now I am in Batman detective mode. At that point, I wasn't even trying to deny it. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy. My mission was to find out for how long. And over the course of April and May, that's what I did. You know, I never had any clue about the depth of info you could secure from phone text and email records until then. We have a family-planned cell phone package, and I was able to pull up quite a bit of data. My soon-to-be ex-wife's data history was telling. The two most frequent numbers she had interacted with from October 2019 to April 2020 were my own and a number ID never seen before. Take a wild guess whose number it was. A quick check on Google confirmed it was the guy from the photos who blocked me on Facebook. We'll call him POS because that's what he is. Again, the picture becomes even clearer at this point, but a lot of their messages and texts were disjointed, indicating she was deleting a lot of them. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy, but nothing in the data could serve as a hot lead. I needed more evidence. It's at this point that I tell my best friend, Oz, what I had found. He asked me if I confronted her with what I had, and I said no, because I felt like it wasn't enough. That's when he told me about an app that I could download to apparently spy on her communications in real time. I won't say the name, as I don't know the rules on that here. I got it installed, synced up my data plan, and waited. Within days of doing so, I finally saw a text string between the two of them, talking about how much fun they'd had the previous night and making plans to do it again that weekend. Boom. Gut punch. To say it was completely devastating was an understatement. I guess that moment counts as my D-Day, and for the next 2 days after, I was just broken. I actively distanced myself from her during those 2 days immediately after D-Day, which she noticed. She'd try to console me and ask me what was wrong, but I'd brush it off and leave her presence. I couldn't even look at her, this woman who I gave 23 years of my life to, who I have given everything to as a husband and more. Stepped outside of our marriage for a guy just 5 years older than our eldest son. By the third day, I wasn't even sad anymore. I was furious. I informed Oz that my suspicion had been confirmed, and he inquired if I had confronted her. I replied in the negative, expressing my desire for payback beyond mere divorce. I aimed to thoroughly disrupt and ruin her life. Formulating a plan, I drew inspiration from a quote in my readings on infidelity, emphasizing that unpredictability is the enemy. This principle became the foundation of my strategy, making her life challenging while secretly planning my exit. As we entered early June, the app remained installed, and each night I meticulously gathered data from their messages. Their exchanges portrayed a full-fledged relationship, including romantic texting, romantic expressions, and explicit content. Having stopped actively reviewing the content, I focused on collecting information and cataloging it on my private FPS server. Simultaneously, I began engaging in unconventional behavior, going out at odd times and returning home later than she did. In her presence, I increased my phone usage, responding to her inquiries about my activities with a nonchalant "just stuff" before putting my phone away. I changed my login information, denying her access. Throughout our marriage, transparency was the norm, but around the presumed start of her affair, she altered her passwords on Facebook and her phone, citing recent security breaches as a cover for concealing the affair. Having briefed Oz on my plan and shared the situation with my older sister and 2 close friends, I entrusted them with secrecy. For context, Oz and I have been friends since childhood, and the other friends, Joey and Na, we've known since high school. Na becomes relevant later. Come July, my STBXW is in full paranoia mode, intensifying her texts and calls, questioning my whereabouts, and expressing concerns about my actions. The seed planted in her head the previous month is beginning to sprout, especially evident in her communication with POS. She confides in him about her doubts and confusion, accusing me of growing cold and distant. The audacity of this woman! Amidst these interactions with POS, she suggests they should avoid meeting at our house, confirming his presence in my home. Thanks, Sue. In a specific communication, POS asks if Shess worried about me potentially cheating on her, infuriating her. Reading this exchange brings me immense joy and laughter at a cheating wife, arguing with her affair partner about the possibility of her husband cheating on her. The irony is palpable. To clarify, I'm not involved with anyone else. When I leave, I usually spend time at OZ's or Joey's, enjoying drinks, watching fights, and bonding with my friends. Alternatively, I might be at my big sis house, hanging out with her and my Bill, who's like an older brother to me. My sis is 52 and her hubby is 58. She informed him about my STBXW's infidelity, but not about my plan, as he tends to be a bit of a blabbermouth. Fast forward to October, and things intensify in my faux affair. For 3 months, Sue is keenly aware of my active withdrawal. From the inception of my plan until October 20th, 2020, the day she confronted me, there was no physical contact between us, no hugs, kisses, or initiation of copulation. Nothing. Not that she needed it, she continued her involvement with POS, either at his place or motels. That afternoon, she calls me at work, an uncommon occurrence before all this began, and asks me to come straight home after work, claiming she has something important to tell me. I won't deceive you. Ali was halfway expecting her to confess to her infidelity. But of course, she didn't. Instead, I arrived home to find her questioning whether I'm unhappy with her. The nerve! She points out that I've been spending too much time away, lacking affection, and our bed life has withered. She suggests I might be pushing her away due to resentment over her treatment during my knee rehab months. Then the punchline asks if I am cheating on her. Folks, I collapsed on the floor, laughing uncontrollably, like Joker laughing gas hysterical. While it may have seemed like I was dismissively laughing off the idea of infidelity to her, I was actually laughing at the sheer irony unfolding before me. In fits of laughter for a good 2 minutes, I compose myself enough to respond. I sit up, meet her eyes for the first time in months, shake my head without giving an answer, stand up, brush myself off, kiss the top of her head, and proceed to settle in for the night. Later that night in my office, I decide to check what Shez's been telling him. Given the brevity of the incident, I fire up the app, and they're indeed texting in real time. She informs POS that she believes I'm cheating on her. She mentions confronting me tonight, describing my reaction as laughter. She feels I don't care about her feelings anymore, and is convinced that Shez lost me. She sees it as karma and acknowledges that she has lost me. The smile on my face reading that must have resembled the Cheshire Cat. She was breaking. Paws tried to console her, stating that if I cared enough, she wouldn't have had to seek comfort from him. However, the tone of her responses indicated doubt. She had the audacity to step out of our marriage during my legitimate injury, keeping the affair going for nearly a year. Yet the thought of losing me to another woman made her waver. What a weakling. Simultaneously, I executed the second part of my revenge plan, organizing my financial affairs. In September, I consulted with a family attorney to initiate divorce proceedings. Armed with the substantial evidence I had gathered, New York being an at-fault state for divorce. The overwhelming proof of Sue's infidelity pretty much assured I could nail her in a divorce case. My attorney advised me to organize all my financial documents in anticipation of potential asset division. Going a step further, I covertly withdrew all my funds from our joint account and transferred them to my personal account. Additionally, I initiated the search for an apartment as part of Phase 2. Fast forward to November, and my behavior remains consistent. In fact, I've escalated it. This is where my friend Na becomes significant. For context, Na and Sue have never been what one would call close. I met Na 2 years before Sue, during my freshman year of high school. From the beginning, Sue viewed Na as a threat since she's my closest female friend. Although Sue has never explicitly addressed it, her mistrust of Na is evident to anyone paying attention. Conversely, Na has never been a fan of Sue. Early in my relationship with Sue, Na pointed out how Sue was intruding into our friend circle while I didn't do the same with Sue's set of friends. This bothered Na because she understood why Sue was doing it, jealousy. Even now, among Sue's circle, there are no male friends except POS, while Na is the only female in my friend group. Na, who had been overseas due to the virus, returned to NYC on November to celebrate her return. Oz, Joey, and I planned a small gathering at Joey's house with dinner and drinks, sticking to CDC guidelines. Na, the mastermind, proposed an idea to trigger Sue by taking photos similar to those I discovered of Sue and POS months earlier and posting them on my Facebook. And that's exactly what we did. Sue got wind of it on the TH, as some friends noticed my updates and observed how uncomfortably close I appeared with Na. This thoroughly confused her because she still believed I was cheating. Although she likely wanted to accuse Na, she knew Na had been stuck in Europe for most of the year. Nevertheless, that didn't stop her from attempting to criticize me that night for being handsy in the photos. I saw this as a perfect opportunity to deliver the lead jab for my knockout blow. I mentioned the pictures with her and POS from last year, noting that he was pretty handsy in them. I pointed out that I didn't get bent out of shape over it, deer in headlights. It was the first time I had even mentioned the guy's name throughout all of this. The gears in her head started spinning in real time as she tried to explain away those pictures. Up to that point, she hadn't known I had seen them. Given how infrequently I use Facebook, when I do post something, it becomes an event, which is why the pictures with Na specifically gained so much attention among our circles. And explain away she did, stating that Hez that way with everyone, he's just a really friendly guy, and she can see how it looks, but there's nothing there. She apologized if those photos caused me distress and offered to delete them. However, the pictures aren't what hurt me. What hurt me was the fact that she had been involved with the guy while deceiving me, claiming to be working extra hours and spending time with friends. As Lieutenant Commander Worf from Star Trek TNG famously said, "Vengeance is a dish best served cold." From that night on, Sue was being unusually clingy and attentive to Malik, annoyingly so. She attempted to initiate affection and copulation, but I stonewalled her at every opportunity. Meanwhile, I continued archiving everything she shared with POS. By this point, I had long since gone numb. Any desire I might have had to save my marriage was dead. I had checked out the day I initiated the first phase of my plan. She confided in him that I had become worse, expressing uncertainty and feeling like I hated her, which I do. Then comes the bombshell. She couldn't see him anymore. The guilt was overwhelming, and she felt like karma was suffocating her. She couldn't risk losing me despite loving POS deeply. She claimed to be still in love with me, emphasizing the need to save our marriage before losing me. "No, my dear, you were about 8 months too late for that." POS lost his composure, proclaiming his love for her and insisting she was making a mistake. That text chain would be their last until about 3 weeks ago. Throughout the remainder of November into December, Sue remained in limbo, trying to gauge my headspace and uncertain if I was actually being unfaithful. Meanwhile, POS bombarded her phone daily, but she didn't respond. I observed her checking her phone often, then quickly putting it away. Meanwhile, Phase 2 of the plan was now officially complete. The divorce papers were done, I found a studio apartment in Co-op City, signed a 2-year lease, and all my money was in my personal account. I was ready to throw my haymaker. Now we're at Thanksgiving. My oldest and his girlfriend hosted a small gathering with our immediate families. It was my oldest, his girlfriend, her parents, myself, Sue, and our youngest. We had a great night, and my oldest's girlfriend, who's studying to be a chef, did all the cooking herself. As I had to maintain the appearance of nothing being wrong between Sue and me, I initiated affection with her several times, that evening kisses on the cheek, cute hugs, and wrapping my arms around her shoulders from behind. These gestures didn't go unnoticed by her, and she reveled in them. Keep in mind, this was the first time I touched this woman since I kissed the top of her head the night she confronted me in October, about 2 months. I won't lie, I felt repulsed doing it, but I had to. I couldn't risk the plan by being distant in front of my boys. My oldest girlfriend and her parents would raise alarms. So my youngest decided to stay overnight with his big brother, and Sue and I headed home. On the drive home, she thanked me for being good to her and said, "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." I had to hold off on bursting into maniacal laughter again and responded, "I know, I just need time." So for the first time realistically since springtime, we had closeness that night. I thought, why not? With what I'm about to do, might as well get some action before I erase her from my existence. I won't go into detail, but it wasn't lovemaking. When I finished, she was a lump of flesh, trying to figure out the direction of the truck that ran her over. No cuddling or anything after. He just got up, showered, and went to sleep in my office, to her confusion. Though I used a contraceptive the first time in 2 decades, she was definitely perplexed by it, but she didn't ask questions. I sure as hell wasn't going raw with her, knowing that she'd been doing so with POS for months at that point. I woke up the next day and checked my handy-dandy spy app, and for the first time in weeks, she responded to POS. The dude went full novella, professing his love for her, claiming she was wasting her time trying to reignite a flame in me that had died. She claimed she had been in a prison with me for 23 years and deserved the love and affection of a man who would cherish her. Keep in mind, this guy is years old, 5 years older than our oldest Sonend. He's infatuated with a year-old married mother of 2. What a top-notch, high-quality POS. She opted to destroy our marriage and dismantle the home we had built for this guy, a pretty boy with a soft side. Ha! In response, she reiterated essentially the same sentiments from their previous conversation. She loves him, enjoyed their time together, but she can't risk losing me. I'm still the love of her life, but she'll always have a place for him in her heart. They can remain friends if he chooses, but the physical relationship between them is over. He pleaded with her to see him one last time that week, and yes, she agreed on more for the road, right? Who am I to say anything? That's what I did to her the previous night. I, of course, added all of that to the archive I had compiled. December 4th marked the beginning of Phase 3, the final stage of Operation Show Bitch Ghost. The divorce papers were in hand, my new place of residence was set up, and now I had to gradually start moving my stuff out of the house. But first, I had to break the news to my boys. I called my oldest to the house that Friday night, had them join me in my office, and laid everything on the table, not the specifics, but that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year, and I would be filing for divorce soon. My 17-year-old was especially shaken up because he had recently experienced his first taste of infidelity. His first girlfriend had cheated on him just 4 months prior. Witnessing him heartbroken a second time at the idea that his own mother was capable of this hit him hard. My oldest took it a lot better and suggested taking his brother to live with him until this blows over, to which I agreed. We packed up some of his stuff, and he asked me if I was going to be okay. I assured him that I would be all right and so would he. I promised that we were going to be all right, and then they were off. The hardest part was now over, and it was time to arm the nukes. Over the next few weeks, day by day, Oz would help me get some of my most sensitive stuff out of the house. I provided him with a list of all the definite items to grab while Sue and I were at work, and left him the spare key. These were things Sue wouldn't notice were missing unless you told her they were gone. I also got a new phone and phone number, informing everyone who needed to know Oz, Joey, my boys, Big Sis, and my mother of my new contact info. Meanwhile, I kept up the ruse with Sue, and she was none the wiser. I trickled bits and pieces of affection to her just to keep her off the trail. While she was still in contact with Paz, not to the extent they were before, but there was still an emotional connection. The fog was faint, but it was still there. All the while, I gathered everything, and I mean everything. Every bit of data I had archived since I started the plan, call logs, texts, pics, emails, everything. I began making printouts. I must have spent over $1,500 on staples, supplies, printer, ink, paper, binders, the works. I cataloged everything in order from the beginning of the affair until that last bit 2 weeks ago, December 16th, in the binders. 14 of them. I boxed each one, gift wrapping and addressing them to various recipients. My father passed away 7 years ago. Her parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, her HR department. I forgot to mention. POS works for the same company, and there's a rule against intercompany relationships due to the nature of her job, several friends, POS, and POS's parents. I carried all those packages to the post office and shipped them on December 16th, with an estimated delivery between December 22 and 24. Perfect. Now we're at Christmas Eve. Sue arrived home around the usual time, unaware if she had seen POS as I stopped tracking her on the app on the 18th, assuming I had gathered all the information needed. She showered, spent some time with me, and I concluded the night in the living room. Yes, I know I'm not the nicest person. The final phase was upon me at last. The nuke I had been arming since June was about to be launched. In the middle of the night, I woke up, wrapped one of the 3 remaining binders with the divorce papers taped to the inside cover, and left it on my side of the bed with a note that said, "Merry Christmas." Next to it, I left my old phone and my lawyer's business card. I packed up the rest of my essential items, enough to fill 2 backpacks, and left my home, where I had spent 23 years, for the last time. That, my friends, was 1 week ago. To Sue, I am completely off the grid, shadowed, ghosted. She's blocked on FB, but for some reason she hasn't blocked me, so I'm keeping tabs on the fallout. It's absolutely glorious. My packages have reached everyone I sent them to, and Sue is facing severe backlash. Her youngest sister completely reprimanded her. Both of her parents condemned her. My mom tore into her mercilessly. I know my mom has a mean streak, but the things she called Sue were unfathomable. Sue is desperately trying to find out if anyone knows where I am, but those who do aren't saying a word. On her FB feed, she's desperately trying to reach me, likely knowing I'm likely looking, but I'm not saying a word to her without my lawyer present. That'll be the next time I share oxygen with her. She has no way of spinning the narrative to paint me as the bad guy because I've exposed her to everyone who matters to her. According to a mutual friend working in the same company as her, she and POS are apparently being put on administrative leave as of tomorrow. So, yeah, chances are she'll be going into 2021 unemployed. As for the final 2 binders, one has been turned over to my lawyer as my final piece of evidence for my impending divorce, and the last one I placed in my storage unit to be burned in Joey's fire pit when the divorce is final. Do I feel guilty about this? No, not even in the slightest. For 23 years, I did right by this woman. I gave her the home she wanted, the family she wanted, the life I felt we both deserved, and I loved her unconditionally. Never did I falter, never did I stray. Never did I even entertain the notion of breaking my vows. When an issue came up that I felt was affecting our marriage, I came to her and told her. And we sorted it out as best we could. Instead of coming to me and expressing her unhappiness with our bed life at the time, she decided to seek comfort in another man's bed. So, no, I have no sympathy for what I did, or for her. She can burn in hell for all I care, the most I stand to. Lose is my house, a car, and maybe a couple of $100 a month in alimony. Still, considering the divorce is filed under the statute of infidelity and NYS is at fault, that might get waived with the insurmountable amount of evidence I've provided. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me, and I'm never looking back. Initially, after discovering her infidelity, I pondered how to salvage the situation. However, witnessing the audacity of their interactions and subsequent communications fueled my anger. What started as regret and sadness quickly transformed into fury. When I confided in my friend Oz, I had already decided to take a scorched earth approach. Unexpectedly, I continued this approach longer than I anticipated. I could have confronted her 4 to 5 months before Christmas, but I confess that I derived pleasure from making her suffer. It turned into a game, and the prize was watching her squirm. While this may make me seem somewhat sadistic, she destroyed our marriage, and I was determined to dismantle her relationships with everyone we know. Despite not being inherently evil or vindictive, I firmly believe in treating others fairly and adhering to the golden rule. However, I cannot tolerate disrespect. My STBXW is a fragile, superficial, self-entitled individual who prioritized her desires over our marriage. She will receive no forgiveness or mercy from me. The upcoming months will be challenging as my divorce unfolds, marked by hurtful words and spiteful actions. Nevertheless, I will remain steadfast in my mission to ruin her, offering no pity or leniency, just as she showed me none when she broke her vows. This battle is far from over, but my determination surpasses hers. I am determined to break her and leave her with nothing, feeling no remorse in doing so. Update. Christmas Day marked the first full day I spent in my new apartmento work in progress, where I plan to reside for at least 2 years. Although I still need to acquire more items, I have overall transformed it into my home. My sons, along with the eldest girlfriend, spent a significant part of the day with me. The girlfriend brought treats and prepared a delightful meal. It provided an opportunity to engage in meaningful conversations with my Sansa connection I hadn't experienced in a long time. My older sister also visited, bringing more goodies and spending time with us, marking the first time she had seen her nephews in nearly a year. Their presence had a positive impact on me, otherwise I might have resorted to excessive drinking if alone. Everyone left around 8-ish, prompting me to decide to hang out with Joey and his wife Claudia. We spent a couple of hours together, had a couple of drinks, and then I returned home. The next significant development occurred on December 29, 2020. Around midday, I received a text from Na, asking if I was busy that night. Since I wasn't, we agreed to meet after I finished work. We went to a nearby diner for indoor dining at 25% capacity. Na openly shared her feelings, confessing that she has liked me since our teenage years but never had the chance to express it due to Sue entering the picture. I've known Na longer than Sue by 2 years, and she has been a part of my social circle with Oz and Joey in high school. We were the social outcasts, the raver kids who didn't fit into conventional cliques. Back then, Na faced challenges with weight and diabetes, but we always had chemistry. Nowadays, Na is a personal trainer and yoga instructor, having transformed into a beautiful swan. In short, we decided that upon the finalization of my divorce, we will start seeing each other. Yes, we slept together that night, and I feel no shame. Na has been a better friend to me than Sue ever was. That's not to say Sue wasn't my best friend, but over the near quarter century I've known Na, she has consistently supported me, even stepping back from her own feelings to allow me to pursue a life with Sue. This selflessness resonated with me in ways I didn't anticipate. Despite sounding like I'm justifying the decision in my head, to me, it was the right choice. And I plan on exploring what the future holds with Na with total commitment. Now on to yesterday, the day I met my wife and her lawyer to discuss the divorce. It has been 2 weeks since I ceased communication with my soon-to-be ex-wife STBXW. This Monday, I received a call from my lawyer informing me that Sue's attorney had scheduled a meeting to discuss divorce terms on January 6, 2021. Yesterday, I met with him on Tuesday to outline my desired terms, an uncontested divorce citing marital neglect from Sue. In summary, I proposed a complete division of assets, selling my half of the house to her and keeping our respective vehicles. I would retain ownership of my cabin in the Poconos, and under the grounds of marital neglect, she would not receive spousal support from me. Regarding my son, whom I'll refer to as 17, he is free to choose his residence post-divorce, likely with me. On Wednesday, I dressed in my Johnny Cash best and attended a meeting at my lawyer's office with my wife and her lawyer. She appeared disheveled and barely held it together. Without delving into legal jargon, her lawyer presented terms for reconciliation, which I promptly rejected. We agreed to a legal separation leading to an uncontested divorce. The only revision is that I will provide $1.653 per month in temporary spousal support to cover utilities until she gains employment. She got fired for inappropriate behavior. This support will last up to a year post-finalization. Financially, it won't significantly impact me, even if she takes time finding a new job. After a full calendar year post-divorce finalization, she is on her own. It's a small price to pay for freedom. If all goes smoothly, I'll be free of her by early April, approximately 3 months from now. Post-meeting. My lawyer provided final words and promised to keep me updated on the filing progress. Outside, Sue approached me, asking if we could talk. I agreed. While she held it together during the meeting, she broke down outside, expressing remorse and stating she never intended for things to go as far as they did. She admitted to falling in love with someone else, but acknowledged the wrongdoing in betraying her husband. She asked for forgiveness and proposed the idea of starting anew in a few years. I informed her that this would be our last conversation. I reminded her that our son is almost an adult, capable of making his own choices. I conveyed that I had given half of my life in unconditional love only for her to confess love to someone else. I expressed the impossibility of forgiving her, stating that I loved who she once was but despised who stood before me. I made it clear that seeing her again would be too soon. Here we are, on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, with her causing a scene, crying her eyes out. A couple of people walked by, giving side glances, but at that point, I didn't care. I wasn't about to publicly offend Harry had already socially and professionally destroyed her. However, I needed to release the last bit of emotion I had for her. I finished by telling her that I didn't regret the 23 years I spent as her husband. My regret was that in those 23 years, she chose the easy way out and I thought she was mine when, in reality, it was just my turn. Putting in my Raycons, I turned around and walked away. Later that night, her father called and apologized. He commended me for always being a good man to his daughter and expressed his disappointment in her actions. I'll miss the old man. He's been my default father figure since my dad passed away years ago. However, I can't see myself maintaining a relationship with anyone on her side of the family. After that call, I went on Facebook and symbolically changed my relationship status to divorced. It's not final yet, but in my eyes, it's over. When I make a post on Facebook, it's an event, so plenty of people started reaching out over Messenger, asking questions. I laid it all out, stating that I filed for divorce from Sue earlier in the day. Na called, shocked at how fast I pulled the trigger. I asked her to come over, and she did. We spent the night together, talking into the wee hours of the morning. I haven't felt this level of relief and connection in a really long time. Na gets me, and I can't get enough of being around her. Since the day she confided in me, she's all that's been on my mind. Some might say it's messed up that I'm moving on so fast, but as far as I'm concerned, my marriage ended the day Poss let Sue touch him. So I'm about done. My divorce is in the works, and I'm moving on to start a relationship with Na. We'll take it slow, and we won't announce anything until the divorce with Sue is legal and official. As for Sue, I couldn't care less about what happens to her. She could move in with POS into our old home for all I care. I'll be getting my money for the house over 2021 in 4 quarterly installments, and apart from the $1,653 I'll pay her monthly, I never have to see or speak to her again. Since only my closest friends, 2 sons, older sister, and mother have my new contact info, and I've completely blocked my soon-to-be ex-wife STBX on all social outlets. She has had no means of reaching me since I left her on Christmas Eve. Still, some of our mutual friends do. Last night, I was in my apartment, and I received a voice call notification on Messenger from one of these friend zone of the few who hadn't abandoned her following my outing of her affair. She didn't waste any time when I answered, saying she had checked on Sue, the STBXW, and found her passed out in the bedroom, foaming at the mouth with 2 bottles of empty pills next to her. She's in the ICU in critical but stable condition. The doctor said she will likely pull through, but she won't be well after. She begged and pleaded for me to come. Her parents and 2 of her sisters were also at the hospital. My guess is they were notified after the hospital attempted to reach me, but Sue would still have my old number as her emergency contact. I simply told her no. Sue is not my problem anymore, and she decided to take the easy way out rather than deal with the shame and agony of the 23-year marriage she blew up. I then told her friend that if Sue's family was there, they could help her sort out the pieces, but as far as Sue and I are concerned, there is no Sue and I anymore. I then ended the call. I've had a few hours to reflect on it, and my sons called me this morning to ask if I knew. I affirmed that I did, but also made it clear to both of them that if they want to be there and supportive of their mother, I won't hold it against them or judge them. After all, she is their mother. However, I personally wash my hands of her and care little to nothing about what she does to or for herself anymore. They were taken aback by this, but they respected my stance. Now that the news is broken about her self-destruction attempt, many friends who had distanced themselves from her are resurfacing, urging me to support her in her time of need despite what she did to me. I've been informed that her affair partner tried to visit her this morning but wasn't allowed because he's not family. I'm being pressured to go see her, but I feel nothing for this woman anymore. I haven't for a very long time. I checked out during the process of getting my payback for her betrayal, and I stand by the fact that I don't care at all for what she's done. In fact, it makes me hate her even more. She's the one who was unfaithful, who thought a near-year-long fling with a guy 5 years older than her oldest son was worth destroying 23 years. Even now, facing the consequences of her choices, she chooses the most selfish way of dealing with it. Now that she's likely to survive, she's garnered immediate sympathy from everyone who took her to task, and I'm being portrayed as the jaded ex-husband unwilling to sympathize. By most of her family except her dad, who reached out and said he respects my decision to stay away. It's like I never truly knew this woman in 23 years, and it has come to this. I understand that the way I broke things off may have put her in a poor mental state, but a whole new set of issues has arisen. Either she had a complete breakdown and decided to damage herself, or she made a risky, calculated move to gain favor back from those who condemned her weeks ago for betraying me. I want to be perfectly clear, I am not going to visit Sue. She waived her right to my care when she let her lover put himself inside her. I may come off as heartless, but despite my calm demeanor, my feelings are still very raw. I don't care about this woman and haven't for a long time. If you were in my shoes, you'd see her actions differently. Maybe tormenting her for months, fooling her into thinking I was cheating on her while she cheated on me, and destroying her socially and professionally led to her meltdown. Maybe I am a heartless sociopath, but as Arthur Fleck said, you get what you deserve. I gave this woman half of my life and did everything to be the best husband she could ever have. By her own admission, I had no bearing on her decision to betray our marriage. She did it for her, and her selfishness knows no bounds. I'm glad to be rid of her. If it makes me the bad guy because I won't see her and never plan on interacting with her again, so be it. I hold true to my convictions. She made the choice to betray me, to put her needs above the needs of our marriage. So now it's my turn to choose me over everything else. She can rot in the darkest pit of hell for all I care. Let everyone else help her fix herself. My obligation to care about her well-being ended the day we signed the separation agreement. I just needed to get this off my chest. If you're going to cast judgment on me for feeling this way, save it. After 23 years and 2 children, I never really knew this woman, and I have no sympathy for her, nor will I ever. Let her rot. I've been informed by Sue's dad that she's been moved from the ICU to the mental health wing. Doctors are still monitoring her mental state. She's conscious and cognitive again, but obviously lethargic. Her father told me she asked if I came to see her, and he said no, after which she shut down. He respectfully said any further news he'll share only if I inquire, understanding the headspace I'm in. Also, I scheduled counseling for 17, with the first consultation this coming Monday. Today, against everything I previously stated, I decided to visit Sue. She's been out of the hospital for 4 days now, and surprisingly, it was Na who convinced me that seeing her in her weakened state might help me let go of the contempt I feel for her. Around 6 p.m., I called her for the first time since I served her. Her hello lacked the brightness I'd known for over 2 decades. Her voice was hoarse and weak. The moment she heard my voice, she began crying, taking almost 3 minutes to regain composure enough to talk again. Before she could say anything, I informed her that I was coming to see her by 8:00 p.m., and she agreed. It's about an hour and a half from Co-op City, where my new apartment is, to my old home. I grabbed a bite to eat from the local pizzeria and started on my way there. I arrived around 7:47 p.m., and she was already at the door before I pulled into the driveway. As I approached, I could see the toll her actions had taken on her, noticeably thinner, an unhealthy kind of thin. As a whole, she looked like the Walking Dead. The first thing she tried was to come in for a hug, and I stopped her cold. She got the hint that I wasn't there to console her and backed off immediately. We went inside and sat in the living room. Almost immediately, Sue told me she wanted to come clean about everything. She explained that she couldn't live with the guilt of what she did to me and the boys. Since the day we signed the separation agreement, she went into a downward spiral of guilt and agony that led to her self-destruction attempt. Her friend, the one who called me from the hospital, had noticed her behavior and started coming over to check on her. She said the doctors told her that if she hadn't been found just an hour earlier, she would have succeeded. Sue admitted to failing me as a wife. Falling for POS was wrong, as was her choice not to pull back when she knew she was getting too deep. She also apologized for sharing many intimate details of our marriage and speaking ill of me to him. She never imagined herself being capable of doing that, but she was. She believed in her head that she was doing the right thing, but when she thought I was cheating, it hit her like a ton of bricks. The feeling of betrayal was suffocating, and she had to get out as soon as possible. But it was obviously too late by then. She then asked me, at what point did I stop caring? To which I replied that the night she confronted me with the notion of me cheating, with the knowledge that she had been with POS for months. At that point, I lost all respect for her, and it solidified my resolve to enact my plan. She told me that when she woke up on Christmas morning and found the gift I left, she was over the moon until she opened it. When she realized what it was and how much I had known, she literally went mad and hasn't set foot in our bedroom since. She was frantically trying to find out if anyone knew where I was, but when she went on Facebook to ask, she started getting thrashed by friends and family about what she had done, with no idea how everyone knew so fast. That's when I told her about the other binders. The look of shock on her face was priceless. It all dawned on her that I did this to her everything she's gone through, her friends turning on her family shaming her, and even her losing her job was my doing. She fell silent and shut down after that. I took the time to use the bathroom, and it was in shambles. The mirror was broken, her skincare products were scattered, and the tub looked like it hadn't been cleaned since they took her to the hospital. When I came back to the living room, she had her face in her hands, weeping, and I can honestly say I felt nothing. No more anger, no more rage, and absolutely not a shred of pity. They say the opposite of love is indifference. Looking at her, that's all I felt. She gazed up at me, uttering, "I messed everything up. I ruined us, and I have no idea what to do. I can't do this by myself." I reminded her she has her family, the friend who found her, and our sons, but not me. She never will ever again. I explained that I came to offer closure from the ordeal she just put herself through, but the moment I exit that door, I won't be looking back. The topic of POS arose shortly after. She disclosed that he had contacted her 2 days ago. They talked for a couple of hours, and it concluded with her advising him to move on with his life, find someone younger, and forget she exists. The rest of the conversation involved Sue apologizing for betraying me and questioning if this is truly the end. I looked her directly in the eyes, without hesitation, and affirmed that yes, it's been over long before I served the divorce notice on Christmas. Sensing it was time to leave, no more words were exchanged. I departed, leaving her on the couch. I closed the door behind me, got into my car, and drove home. I needed to express this while it's fresh in my head. The saga of Sue is over. 17 and I are both scheduled for counseling in the coming weeks. Na and I are still going strong, adhering to the plan of keeping things under wraps until my divorce is final. I'm staying active, motivated, and looking forward to a future with a woman I know will cherish and honor me as she has done from the shadows for decades. It's time for me to focus on the life ahead of me. Update anyway, it's been just over 2 months since I served my wife divorce papers, and it's been a month since my last update. Many people have expressed concern about 17, my youngest son. Just days after my last update, he began individual counseling. I accompanied him for his first 2 sessions, and he has been going on his own for every session since. He attends twice a week, and it has significantly helped. Overall, he's doing fine, but I can see that his trust in relationships has been completely shattered. The lasting effects of his own experience with infidelity, coupled with dealing with his mother's actions of cheating and her attempted suicide, have left a significant scar that I believe may take decades to heal. I discovered that his experience was even worse than he let on. He actually caught his ex-girlfriend making out with a guy he thought was a friend, but it turned out the guy was only getting close to him to get to her. He never told me this aspect of his breakup. My heart breaks for my son to have had to experience this at such a pivotal point in his formative years. You do all you can to protect your children, but then life goes ahead and says no. He has decided to stick to individual counseling for the long term, and I have assured him that he can talk to me about anything, without any boundaries. Next up is my own individual counseling. If you've listened to most of my entries, you know I have a bit of an anger problem. It's strange, because I've always been a reserved, controlled, and stoic man. However, this whole experience evidently awakened a sleeping dragon in me, a pure fire breather. I've discussed everything with my therapist, and when I say everything, I mean everything. When I explained the extent of what I did to my ex, he was both impressed and appalled, which wasn't the reaction I was expecting. Apparently, I display sociopathic tendencies when provoked, which doesn't surprise me given everything I did. My sessions are not so much dramatic, they're more organizational, unpacking all of the things going on in my head regarding the implosion of my marriage and trying to find balance. Now, for the elephant in the room now. I have no idea where I'd be without this woman. I never expected to have such a caring, empathetic, nurturing woman by my side to carry me through all of this. We are still going strong, and despite our attempts to keep our ongoing relationship under wraps, it's pretty much out in our group. She just gets me. She always has since we were teens. Since she knows the pain of having the person you've invested your life in cheat on you, she does all she can to help me cope with my feelings. We split time between staying at her place and my own. The discussion has come up about moving in with each other, but her 5-year-old daughter puts a kibosh on that idea. My place isn't big enough for 3 people, and I'm locked into my lease until 2022, so for now, we'll keep splitting time between places when her daughter is away with her father. Na's at my place, when she has her daughter, I'm at hers. Speaking of her daughter, I absolutely adore her, and she's taken a shine to me. I wish I could find the words to truly put into perspective how important Na has been to me through all of this. If you haven't taken the time to listen to my previous entries, Na has secretly been in love with me since we were sophomores in high school. But she was an ugly duckling back then, who thought she had no chance with me. She actively sat by and watched me chase after, date and marry my soon-to-be ex-wife Sue, knowing how she felt for well over 25 years. She held this secret until a week after I had my divorce hearing, where we met for food, and she laid everything on the table. I consider myself lucky to have her in my life. We constantly talk about what the future holds between us. Since we've both been burned by marriage, we're definitely not going that route, but we have discussed a civil union. Well, probably wait a little while before going that route, but it's pretty much decided between the two of us that we are it for each other. Last but not least, the soon-to-be ex-wife Sue. What I want to share with everyone about her is, well, there's nothing to share. Since the final time I spoke to her after her suicide attempt, I've implemented a 100% no-contact policy. I have no knowledge of her current situation or activities, and I have no desire to find out. In my perspective, she's no longer a part of my life. That pretty much covers it. Life moves forward. It's March 2nd as I type this, so there's only 1 more month until the completion of the filing process. By this time next month, I'll officially be a free man, and am eagerly counting down the days until I can genuinely embark on the next chapter of my life. To clarify a point, I made an error in my statement regarding being clinically diagnosed as a sociopath. I assumed that because my therapist mentioned I display sociopathic tendencies when provoked, it was a clinical diagnosis. It wasn't. It was simply his professional observation. Al, my oldest son, who is 22, doesn't genuinely intend to cause damage to POS. His remarks were made in the heat of anger. Update on April 13th, just 1 month ago, Sue officially became my ex-wife. Initially, my lawyer informed me that it would be finalized on the 18th. But due in part to the reopening of things in NYC with the decrease in COVID cases, it was pushed through a few days earlier. Jeff, my lawyer, called me on April 12th and requested that I visit him the following day. When I did, he handed me the finalization notice and shook my hand. I couldn't just leave it at that, so I went in and gave him a hug, expressing gratitude for all he'd done for me. On my way home, all I could do was replay mental movies of everything the last 24 years of my life, memories, and history. When I stepped into my apartment, it finally happened. I fell on the floor, and all the compressed emotion came pouring out. I haven't cried like that in ages, but it wasn't a sad cry, not by any means. My soul felt liberated after being held in the deepest, darkest abyss. That night, I made a phone call to 22. I kept it short, saying that it's finalized and his mother and I are no longer married as of that day. He asked how I felt. I'm sure he could tell in my voice I'd been crying, and I told him I was fine. Next, got on the phone and we spoke for nearly minutes. 22 and his fiancée have been looking after him well, and he, like myself, is still going to therapy. I won't go into detail about our conversation, but I will say there's still a lot of work to be done, especially regarding his view of relationships. Later that night, Na came to see me, as she always does, and I shared the news. She wrapped her arms around my waist and held tight as, yes, I cried again. Once I composed myself, Na assured me that no matter what, she would never betray me and loves me with all her heart. Every word of it is true. While I don't regret the life I built with Sue and appreciate the 2 strong sons she gave me, it's clear to me now that I picked the wrong woman. In the last 4.5 months, Na has given so much without asking for anything in return. All she asks is for me to be there for her. I won't dwell on her for too long, but she truly is my hero. Following the divorce finalization, some other interesting events occurred. Notably, POS reached out to me. Yes, he actually sent me a message. I believe he has suffered enough. His first action was to apologize for his role in all of this. He explained the consequences of the binder I sent to his mother. Essentially, has been excommunicated from his family. His devout Catholic mother, who attends church 3 days a week, was enraged to learn that her son had broken up a marriage that lasted almost a quarter century. She kicked him out that very day, and within a week, his employer, after receiving the binder, fired him as well. He's been couch hopping and searching for a new job ever since. He mentioned that he wanted to reach out to me on social media, all the places he blocked me when avoiding Sue, but he admitted he was afraid because, in his words, if I was able to find him before, I could find him again. I confess, I could have gone all in on destroying this guy, but I refrained. I inquired about the last time he saw Sue, and he admitted it had been months. The last time he spoke to her, Sue advised him to forget about her and move on with his life, consistent with what Sue told me. I asked a few more questions, and surprisingly, the guy was forthcoming, perhaps seeking penance for the chaos he caused. Much of what he said aligned with information from the text documentation I gathered. I didn't respond, Moochie asked, and he answered. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes before he reiterated his apology. That's when I delivered this message. You're a 27-year-old man who has to live the rest of your life knowing that your own mother now loathes you for breaking up a marriage almost as long as you've been breathing. I know you've messaged me because karma is eating at you, but I won't give you closure. When I was 27, I was building a legacy. Right now, you're a homeless, jobless homewrecker. If you're smart, you'll learn from this lesson. If not, you'll stay a fup until you're my age, assuming you make it that far. I wish you luck, but you don't need luck. You need to get your crap in order. With that, I ended the conversation and blocked him. It may not be the closure he sought, and I could have been more hostile, but I believe those words will haunt him enough. The next significant event is that as of May 4th, 2021, Na is now my wife. Over the last 2 months, we've had lengthy discussions about our future. Na made it clear that she has no intentions of being with anyone else and desires to be my wife, urging me to adopt her daughter Anna as my own. Anna, who just turned 6, idolizes me, and I am the first father figure she's had since her biological father left when she was 4. Na has been cautious about introducing any man into Anna's life unless they had staying power, and I, with experience raising children, fit the bill. Anna and 17 have developed a close bond resembling a big brother-little sister dynamic, which my therapist views as a positive sign. Despite 17 feet's shattered innocence, he sees innocence in Anna that he wants to protect. So we decided last Monday to go to City Hall and get married. It took 24 hours to get the marriage license, and the reveal was the most uneventful ever. Oz mentioned, as if no one didn't see this coming, and Big Sis said, now placing bets on when the now expecting post goes up. We thought we were keeping our relationship under wraps, but apparently everyone had figured it out already. This woman has professed her undying, unconditional love for me, laying in my arms and expressing happiness. She shared her feelings about me over the past 25 years, even during my marriage to Sue. She lamented that Sue won and admitted to occasional thoughts of having an affair with me. Despite that, throughout all the years I've known her, she has given me so much and asked so little in return. Even the woman I married and had 2 children with has never shown the amount of love to me that Na has. It would be foolish not to give her my name, so now she has it, and we're in the early stages of paperwork for me adopting Anna. And lastly, there is Sue. I haven't communicated with her since my last visit to our marital home nearly 4 months ago. However, mutual friends, the few that remain, occasionally provide me with updates. Through one of those friends, a realtor, I learned that she sold the house, and he offered her a position as a clerical assistant in his firm, waiving the assistant payments I had to make due to her unemployment. She now resides in a small apartment close to his office, which he also helped arrange. She is functional but a mere semblance of her former self. Her weight gain has been minimal, and she keeps to herself, focusing on her work and avoiding socializing with anyone but him, likely due to the origins of the issue beginning with her socializing with coworkers. The last update I received about her was at the end of March, where I expressed gratitude to him for looking out for her but made it clear I no longer needed updates. She is no longer my concern. As 17 approaches legal adulthood in a year, I have no reason to engage with her again, and I won't. And that concludes my journey of betrayal, revenge, attempted suicide, and mental agony. After this, I am retreating back into the swamp to live with my new frog wife and her little tadpole. December 24th marked the 2-year anniversary of the night I served divorce papers to my ex and left her for good. Much has transpired since then, and as I reflect on where my life was compared to where I am now, it amazes me that I am still standing. A lesser man might have crumbled under the weight of all I experienced. 2 crucial factors compelled me to persevere. Firstly, my youngest son needed me to set an example of standing up for oneself and not allowing a partner to walk all over you or control the narrative. At the time of D-Day, he had experienced being cheated on by his first girlfriend. The idea of his own mother doing the same to me, akin to what his ex-girlfriend did to him, significantly affected him. Secondly, there's my now girlfriend, Na, whom I've known for 25 years. She had been in my life before my ex, Sue. Over the course of everything, I discovered that Na had harbored feelings for me since our teenage years but never mustered the courage to confess. When Sue entered the picture, Na stepped back and let me go. However, she has loved me from the shadows ever since, witnessing my struggles. She felt it was time to reveal her feelings, and we've been together ever since. Life has moved forward. Na and I are now living together in a civil union, enjoying all the benefits of marriage without the associated headaches. In the unlikely event we decide to part ways, we simply break the contract and go our separate ways with what we brought to the union. No lawyers, no messy paperwork. I doubt that day will come. Na was previously married with a now 6-year-old daughter. We both agreed from the start never to marry again, leading us to pursue the civil union route. My sons and her daughter are inseparable when together. My boys revealed their desire for a little sister, and she has seamlessly filled that role. The relationship between her and 18 has blossomed into the classic big brother-little sister dynamic, which brings me immense joy. There was a point where I feared 18 would shut himself off completely, but thanks to therapy and our discussions, he has come full circle. He remains a bit shy around girls his age, and am not pressuring him. He'll get back on track when he's ready. 23 and his fiancée are now officially married as of August this year. The wedding was remarkable, mostly funded by her parents, despite my insistence on contributing. Her father, with whom I've developed a good friendship, was well aware of the divorce circumstances and assured me that he and his wife would cover all expenses. Sue, my ex-wife, attended the wedding. 23 is on better terms with his mother than 18, who hasn't communicated with her since the upheaval began. It's his choice, and I won't force him to maintain a relationship or communication until he's ready. Seating arrangements were made to avoid us laying eyes on each other, though I did catch a glimpse of hair or what's left of her. The woman I saw wasn't the one I married. She looked frail and weak. The divorce evidently took a hefty toll on her. In my heart, I wanted to feel pity, but there was absolutely nothing there. Na, at one point, grabbed my arm tightly and asked if I was okay. I assured her I was fine and that today was about my son becoming a husband, nothing more. Continuing from that, I received perhaps the best news when we went to 23 and his wife's place for Thanksgiving. She's a chef and lives for big events. I'm going to be a grandpa. His wife was 1.5 months pregnant at the time. After dinner, I shared a congratulatory cigar with my son, and we had an extensive man-to-man talk first, since it all started. He confided in me that he was nervous, mentioning that he wouldn't know what to do if something similar happened to him. I advised him that you can't force anyone to be loyal, emphasizing that you only control yourself and how you handle such situations. It's how you handle it that defines you. Soft times make you happy, hard times make you aware. I don't think he has anything to worry about. His wife admires him, and she has been by his side through it all. I cherish her for keeping my son focused and on track, as a good woman should for her man. The gender reveal is next month, and I secretly hope it's a girl. On the home front, Na and I are in the early stages of discussing the possibility of me adopting her little girl and her taking my name. Although she currently has her father's last name, he has been out of the picture since she was 1, making 0 attempts to make contact. We don't even know if Hes still alive, and Hes definitely not in the US anymore. Na was born here but is of Albanian descent. Her ex was born in Albania and had dual citizenship. He is likely back in Albania, and well, never see him again. Nothing is definite, but Na has made it clear she doesn't want her daughter to carry her ex's name. And that's it. I've been living my life one day at a time, working hard, and spending time with the love of my life and her darling daughter. Life goes on. To all of you in the darkness, questioning if it ever ends and if you will heal from betrayal, the answer is yes. Commit yourself to not letting the darkness consume you. You mean too much to too many people to let that happen. Reach out to those who love and care for you. Walking the path of recovering from infidelity alone is a fool's errand, no good comes of it. Put your faith in those who will support you. As for your cheating partner, expose the truth once you have it. Find proof, protect your heart and assets, plan your exit strategy, and make the truth known. Never let them control the narrative, accept gaslighting, or succumb to blame shifting. Trust your instincts. If your gut says something is wrong, find out the truth. Never ignore the red flags when wearing rose-colored glasses. They're impossible to see.
Story 2.
I gazed at my wife of 5 years and declared, "Aaron, it's either him or me. No middle ground." She sat beside my supposed boss, Plato Giannis, grasping his well-groomed hand until I spoke. As I uttered those words, she withdrew her hand, confusion and fear etching her beautiful face. She shook her head in surprise, causing her blonde hair to gleam in the lamplight. "Just for the weekend. Come Monday, everything returns to normal. Can't you enjoy some time with Elle for now?" La is L.A. Logan, real name Ellen Johnson. Now seated next to me, she has been fervently trying to seduce me for the past few hours. A striking woman with luscious dark hair and one of the most enviable bodies globally, especially if you appreciate curves, which I certainly do. Rumors also circulate that she's top-notch. It's all part of Plato's jest. When Aaron and I were invited to this island for a weekend, the assumption was he wanted to familiarize himself with me better. I'm a renowned author, and he acquired the publishing company that released my work about 3 months ago. However, the entire weekend was actually orchestrated for Plato to have relations with my wife. I'm an average writer, penning detective novels and thrillers featuring my protagonist, Rick Rocker. He unravels mysteries of locked rooms and takes daring leaps off cliffs to elude lunatics. His bed life is diverse and exciting, effortlessly charming beautiful women. A martial arts expert and trained assassin, he's a jack of all trades. He's a fantasy wrapped in a thin layer of reality. And my books sell reasonably well, though the publishing house boasts several more significant and better-selling authors. I only have a captivating wife who caught Plato's attention. They crossed paths at a grand dinner and dance organized by Mr. G for his group of writers and editors. The event made an impression on Aaron, especially when she danced with Mr. G to multiple musical numbers. Polished and a decade senior to 28-year-old Aaron, he possessed long dark hair and a commanding presence. Observing their dance, I noted his adept movements. When the group took a break, they returned to our table, and Mr. G expressed admiration for Aaron, stating that she danced beautifully. I merely nodded, and my lack of response momentarily puzzled him. He then mentioned attending to other guests, saying it was a pleasure. Aaron smiled and reciprocated with Plato. I scrutinized her, noting the swift transition from Mr. G to Plato. I inquired if she was impressed with my boss, to which she replied positively, accompanied by a lascivious grin. I suggested, "Let's see whose wife he manages to snag, huh?" She turned out to be the wife of one of the editors, and during the evening, 3 more revealed they were editors' wives. All of this unfolded a month ago. I am Donald Lake, and I have no nickname. Standing at about 6 feet and weighing 169 pounds, I have curly brown hair, blue eyes, and am 30 years old. I am in good physical shape and athletic. Aaron, too, is in good shape and practices fencing, a sport of skill and coordination. It was at a fencing lesson she taught that I first met her. I was conducting the usual research for Rick, who was to engage in sword fights in the next book, The Adventurer. I always undertake extensive research before writing an adventure book, a key selling point of mine. Rick doesn't do anything I haven't tried. My journey to becoming a writer was an ascent up a steep staircase. I graduated from high school and did not pursue formal education thereafter. In fact, since I was 10, I recognized myself as a writer. Throughout school, I penned story after story, with 2 published in obscure literary magazines during high school. Despite considering myself a serious writer, the need to work for a living arose. After finishing school, I worked as a car mechanic, which I enjoyed. However, it didn't pay much, prompting me to start writing thrillers. Miraculously, one sold, followed by another and another. My current publisher signed me after receiving my first Rick Rocker novel. Sally Baker became my editor, and we quickly found common ground. A sweetheart but deeply married, she had elementary school-aged children. While working on the second Rocker book, I met Aaron. I completed the book after receiving advice from her about a sword duel, and our professional relationship evolved into several dates, eventually leading to closeness. Our connection was immediate, and we both were delighted. At the time, Aaron operated her music store, surviving the initial stages of starting a business thanks to loans from a family trust. The store featured various instruments in one section and recordings of diverse music, along with sheet music in the other. So, fencing is just a hobby. When we got married, she was 23, and I was as happy as I thought it was possible to be happy. We had plans for children, and very soon, but my publishing house was sold to Mr. G, or Plato as Aaron calls him. One day, Aaron came home excited, mentioning that next weekend Plato had invited us to his island. I stared at her, questioning why she was telling me instead of him. Aaron explained that she ran into him last week, had lunch, and gave him a tour of the store. Today he called with an invitation, expressing his desire to get to know the writers better. Aaron suggested he would be in contact with me soon. Curious, I asked if he had been in contact with her and others. She reassured me, denying any inappropriate contact. I insisted on knowing why she didn't mention the lunch and shopping until today, and she admitted that he had made advances, but she blew him off. She kept quiet, thinking I might get in trouble given his ownership of the company. Now, with my apparent enthusiasm for the island visit, Aaron disclosed that it would be just the two of us and a special friend of his, along with the staff, to get to know us better. I remarked cynically about his intentions to get to know everyone. Aaron reassured me, stating that she could handle the situation and questioned if I was sure I could handle it. I assured her that everything would be great. However, I firmly declared my decision to decline the invitation, deeming it too dangerous for us. Aaron pleaded for reconsideration, expressing that we would have fun, but I remained resolute, apologizing for my decision. She sulked for the rest of the evening. The next day I called the main office and requested to speak with Mr. G. He returned my call 15 minutes later, expressing anticipation for our weekend on the island. I declined, stating my discomfort. I mentioned that it seemed my wife knew about it before me, having had lunch with him, and she didn't inform me initially. According to her, he had been pestering her, and she was concerned about my reaction if I knew everything. He acknowledged his appreciation for Aaron on various levels, citing her attractiveness and entrepreneurial qualities. He also mentioned my status as one of his most profitable writers. He claimed a desire to get to know both of us better. Despite his efforts, I maintained my stance, apologizing and asserting that it would not work. Disappointed, he expressed regret and stated that he wished I would change my mind. He mentioned keeping the weekend open at that point. We parted ways about 3 hours later. As I finished the next Rick book, my agent, Brock Levin, contacted me. I inquired about how he knew about my declining Mr. G's invitation. Brock explained that the vice president of sales had called him, insisting that I should attend. He conveyed the potential consequences of under-advertising the new book, which would be detrimental to both of us financially. I questioned if there was a direct threat, and Brock clarified that while not explicit, the threat was implied, emphasizing that Mr. G played a tough game. I assured Brock that I would be in touch. After ending the call, I emailed Sally the conclusion of the new book, along with some instructions. Later, she called, and we discussed the situation. In the meantime, I delved into researching Plato Giannis and his island. The island was named Hedonism, meaning pleasure in Greek, essentially Pleasure Island. As I delved deeper, I uncovered numerous stories of coital misconduct on the island, including 2 divorce cases where the island was cited as a factor. However, these stories were published in gossip sources. Several photographs of Mr. G with women, including 2 married ones, raised serious concerns for me. I located a picture of the place on Google Maps and familiarized myself with the entire layout. Situated off the coast of North Carolina among islands popular for golf and beach holidays, this 2-mile-long and approximately 1-mile-wide island faces south and is shielded from the elements. It boasts 2 piers, multiple buildings, including a large house, tennis courts, and a swimming pool, leaving me puzzled about the need for a pool with great beaches around. I downloaded detailed photos and compiled them into a topographic map, concluding that a decent boat or seaplane would be necessary for the journey. Lacking both, I know people who possess them. On that Friday evening, Aaron returned home promptly, appearing joyful. For dinner, I had a substantial chicken salad and white wine. As Aaron changed, she mentioned hearing that I might have reconsidered not going to the island. I looked at her, remembering Plato's mention of changing one's mind at lunch. She clarified, "No, silly. He's in New York, and we're here in good old Virginia. He called me, mentioning his apartment in McLean." Questioning how she knew he was in New York, I was met with a dismissal of paranoia. Aaron explained that Plato suggested ordering his plane from the national airport if we agreed to go, but I reiterated that I hadn't changed my mind. Frustrated, Aaron called me stubborn and suggested she could go alone, but I expressed concerns about enjoying myself and fearing potential divorce. I inquired about the possibility of her sleeping with him, to which Aaron responded that she wouldn't go without me. I questioned how I could let her go alone, emphasizing potential consequences upon her return and the risk of our relationship being jeopardized. Aaron affirmed her attraction, but assured me that we were still passionate, and she wouldn't take the risk. Believing her, I asked if she believed it, to which she replied not to believe her at all, acknowledging that my trust was almost empty. An accidental spill of wine during this conversation led to laughter, hugs, and kisses, culminating in a trip upstairs lasting an hour. The unpleasant topic faded as we lay in bed. Aaron asserted she wouldn't risk our relationship for a billionaire, seemingly assuming that we would go to the island. Anne commented that it was decided, tensing but not elaborating further. I inquired about her eagerness for the trip, urging her to provide the truth. After a moment of silence, she explained that it seemed exciting to communicate with such an important and influential person. She quickly clarified that she didn't mean be with, but rather communication. Reflecting on the situation, I noted that he was born into wealth and significantly increased his fortune, having a substantial head start. Similar to me, he pursued relationships with women. Despite my concerns, Anne affirmed her belief that everything would be good and fun. Considering that we were on the verge of trying for children, I recognized that this could be a potential time for Aaron to stray. Doubting her honesty, I reluctantly agreed to the trip, warning Aaron that if she ended up with this guy, it would be irreversible. She acknowledged the warning, expressing her gladness about the decision. Deciding that this warning was my last, I saw it as a test of her worthiness as a wife. Temptation would reveal the truth, and time would be the judge. The following day, I accepted the invitation and made contingency plans with my friend. I also checked the island's cellular communication availability. It was there. Still, as a precaution, I brought my satellite phone. The small plane from the national airport landed at a small airport, greeted by a man named Simon. He took us to the pier, where we boarded a boat with a comfortable cabin and a powerful engine, driven by another man, Charlie. After about 40 minutes, we docked at the island. Aaron and I spent time exploring the ocean and other islands. Simon briefed us on our location and island activities. He was a friendly, muscular guy with a wonderful smile and laugh, larger than me. Approaching the north side pier, with Aaron leading the way, Simon commented that I didn't seem very happy with the trip and suggested calling me Don. I acknowledged having doubts, considering Simon's 6 years of working for Mr. G, expecting him to understand my reservations. When Simon inquired about why I came if I was so worried, I explained it was to see what happens. I also asked if he was Mr. G's bodyguard, to which Simon confirmed, mentioning his presence was just a precaution, although Mr. G was capable of handling himself. Curious about Simon's preparedness, I asked if he was armed. Simon mentioned having a knife, but clarified that weapons were not allowed on the island. Expressing my distrust of the island's rules, I admitted to not being a very trusting person these days. Simon assured me that no firearms were needed, emphasizing that I wouldn't require one no matter what happened. The boat pressed tightly against the pier, and Simon, along with a young man on the pier, secured it. Aaron received Simon's hand, and I disembarked from the boat, noticing Simon's slight worry. Following Simon's direction, I accompanied Aaron toward the substantial house. Upon our arrival, Mr. G greeted us, dressed casually in swimming trunks and a sleeveless shirt. Ella, considered the most beautiful woman in the world, accompanied him. I observed her, discovering who else would join us. It became apparent that she was Helen Johnson from Jonestown, the semi-official mistress on the island and in several houses owned by Mr. G. Though she was once seen in the company of other noble men, it occurred less frequently now. Mr. G seemed to have secured an exclusive agreement, at least in some way. Mr. G extended his hand to shake. Ella hugged Aaron, and then Mr. G embraced both Aaron and Ella. She smelled delightful during the hug, and her lips touched my ear. We were escorted to a large room and offered drinks. Despite the 1 o'clock afternoon timing and a light plain snack, a small buffet awaited us. Opting for sparkling water, I abstained from drinking, while Aaron chose wine. They both sampled a small selection from the buffet. During this, Mr. G inquired about the new book I had sent to Sally the previous week, assuring him it was on schedule. Mr. G complimented my punctuality with a smile. Ella, having read all my books, expressed anticipation for the thriller involving rock climbing, flying, small planes, and a love interest. She exclaimed, "Cannot wait. Maybe I can watch it sooner." Mr. G supported this idea, turned to Aaron, and inquired about the music business. After Aaron's positive response, I humorously mentioned Marjorie's new book, predicting it would sell well. Marjorie, known as Marjorie Wright, wrote serious fiction, but still sold a lot of books. Mr. G revealed Marjorie's rising sales and reminded me of my obligation for another book, to which I affirmed my ongoing work on a Christmas-themed mystery. L suggested moving on and proposed going for a swim. Mr. G promptly stood up, encouraging us to join him, and ran out the door. L mentioned that if we had swimsuits, she would show us to our room to change. The three of us stood up, and Ella led us into a large double bedroom, closing the door behind us. In the room we changed into swimsuits. I opted for regular trunks, while Aaron chose a skimpy pink bikini. I expressed my opinion that the situation was excessive and questioned who Aaron was trying to impress. She responded that she just wanted to look good, mentioning Elle's beauty. I countered, telling her she was no less beautiful. Although she disliked my tone, Aaron refrained from responding. Upon descending, Ella wore an electric blue bikini, similar in size to Aaron's. I found both of them entirely enamoring. Exiting, we walked to the Southside beach on a wooden path. Mr. G was already in the water, swimming behind the breakwaters. Aaron conveyed her reluctance to swim that far, a sentiment shared by Ella, who shuddered. Despite this, I dove into the surf, swam to where Mr. G was using his crawl, and joined him. He was a proficient swimmer for his size, easily matched by my water-friendly body type, sometimes changing strokes. We swam until he tired, and I followed him back to shore. As we approached, a large wave knocked him off his feet, and I picked him up. He spat out seawater and sand, and I held him tightly as we walked out. His legs seemed like wet noodles, likely from overextending himself in our swimming competition. Quickly regaining composure, he pulled away, stating that he was fine and the wave had taken him by surprise. Approaching the sunbathing women, I inquired who wanted to swim. Ella immediately stood up, her top slipping slightly as she raised her hand. Both of us ran to the surf. Aaron declined, so I pursued Ella. The rear view was impressive. She dove in like an Olympian, swimming beyond the breakwaters. I followed her, amazed at her superior swimming compared to Mr. G. Swimming alongside for a distance, she suggested, "Let's turn," which I did. Intrigued by the glimpse of flesh, I let her get about 4 meters ahead, observing her from the side. She turned over, floated on her back, and her chest swayed in and out of the water. An absolutely amazing woman. Given my proficiency in backstroke, I joined her, swimming alongside until she declared, "I've had enough," and swam back to the shore, pausing briefly to glance at her from behind. Upon surfacing from the waves, Aaron and Mr. G were nowhere in sight, but my attention shifted to my snug swimming trunks. She joked about me being Superman, and I chuckled, suggesting there was only one way to find out. Taking a step toward me, she halted, stating that we couldn't do this here, no matter how much she wanted it. With that, she turned and ran. On land, she couldn't match her speed in the water, allowing me to easily catch up, and we proceeded to the veranda. Ours were missing, leaving me to ponder if this had already transpired. Elle inquired about my profession, asking if I really wrote. Confirming, I explained how I aimed for believability in Rick's actions. Elle stared, momentarily diminishing my hardness, but as expected, it returned. She possessed a commanding presence. I firmly told Elle to back off, emphasizing my marital status and expressing a desire to keep it that way. I asked her as a favor not to pursue anything further. Elle laughed, labeling me a tongue-tied writer. I muttered, "Oh my God," and suggested checking on Aaron and Mr. G. I asked if it mattered to her, and she expressed interest, to which I replied, "Oh yeah, please." I then conveyed to Elle that I wanted her to understand I wouldn't be sleeping with her over the weekend. I explained that whatever Aaron decided to do, if they reached that point, I would leave. I acknowledged that I would likely long regret what I had just said, all while smiling. As Elle warned me that it wasn't easy to shake her off her tail, she entered the house. I waited a few minutes before following her. When I went upstairs to change clothes, I found no one. However, upon entering our room, I heard the shower running, which abruptly stopped as soon as it registered. No votes. Aaron opened the door, wrapped in a towel. She gasped upon seeing me and asked if Elle had already got to me. I assured her that Elle hadn't and explained that I wasn't going with her. I expressed hope that Aaron wouldn't go with Mr. G either, reminding her that we had discussed the situation earlier. I inquired about what they had been doing while Elle and I were swimming. Aaron informed me that Mr. G showed her around, pointing out the swimming pool, tennis court, and gym downstairs. She emphasized that there was no relationship activity involved. I acknowledged my belief that Mr. G wouldn't engage in such risky behavior, considering they didn't know how long Elle and I would be gone, and I suspected they had been watching us during our swim. Aaron concurred, describing Mr. G as a gentleman. However, she expressed concern that sooner or later, he would come for me. I admitted to the likelihood and added that Elle would come for her as well. Aaron grinned, saying it wasn't very comforting, but assured that she wouldn't give in, emphasizing that I shouldn't either. We discussed our plans for the evening, with Aaron declaring that we had time for love after drinks and snacks at 5. She dropped the towel, and I admitted I was still on edge because of Elle. We engaged privately with genuine zeal, only realizing afterward that the windows were open. Aaron remarked that it didn't matter, stating that they were married. Glancing out the window, Elle sat on a sun lounger about 6 meters away. She looked up, smiled, waved her hand, and then reached for her shorts. I distanced myself from the window. Aaron noticed my renewed arousal and fixed her gaze on me. Glancing out the window, she remained entranced for a while. A groan emanated from outside. Aaron turned to me, exclaiming, "Oh my God, Donnie, forget about yourself. She can have me. I can give up on you. I will not give up." Aaron teased that I had to beg Elle to give up, claiming it was the only chance I had. I mentioned that I had already tried begging, but it didn't seem to work. I speculated that Plato had given Ella a task so he could have me. Finding the situation strange, but admitting it kept my interest. I promised Aaron that I wouldn't give in to Elle's advances, expressing gratitude for her help. Aaron observed that I was still erect, and suggested that we could engage privately every 2 hours to alleviate the situation. We descended to the main room in casual attire, Docker shorts and a collared shirt for me, and Aaron in a dress with her hair down and high-heeled sandals. Mr. G was already there, sipping beer. He inquired about our swim with Ella, and I responded positively, praising Ella's swimming talents. Mr. G suggested I call him Plato, appreciating the famous name. He mentioned his father's fondness for reading about Plato. Ella joined us, also wearing a dress and heels. The dress seemed modest, but looked anything but on her. I sensed Aaron feeling a bit insecure, understanding it was part of the game. Elle attempting to outshine Aaron, who, in turn, would try to assert herself by winning Plato's attention. I moved closer to Aaron, putting my arm around her shoulders. Plato informed us about the available beverages and snacks, expressing a preference for pretzels. As he spoke, he ate one. The 4 of us chatted for a while, and then Ella took me to show me around the house, which I found impressive. I asked if Plato used the gym, and Elle confirmed, mentioning his preference for weightlifting. She pointed to the bench with a barbell and described it as heavy. I demonstrated a few swings with the barbell, with Ella watching intently from above. Ella mentioned that Plato only did 3 reps before resting, and as she spoke, she began breathing heavily. I decided to lift the barbell and did 8 more reps. Plato then commented on Ella's strengths, suggesting that her role for the weekend should be to seduce me so Plato could take care of Aaron. Ella acknowledged that similar tasks had occurred before, expressing her willingness to finish the job, even if it wasn't usually very pleasant. She playfully asked if I would stop if she started begging. I was genuinely serious in my response, but she perceived it as a joke, stating that she wouldn't stop, but would enjoy seeing me beg. Elle then ascended the stairs and I waited for my hardness to subside before standing up. The three of them huddled together in the living room and conversed. When I entered, they fell silent, and Plato suggested I have something to drink, maybe beer. I glanced at the bar, walked over, extracted a bottle of Corona, and popped it open. The others had wine, and we chatted for a bit. I then asked if they had finished discussing their plot, or if I should leave, prompting an awkward silence. Ellis Lentley observed the others, mainly Aaron, who looked at Plato. Plato then stated that there were no secrets. At that moment, Simon came in and declared that dinner was served, leading us into the dining room, where dishes were arranged on the buffet table. It was a familial serving style. We sat at one end of a large table. They poured water, but I opted for my beer and refrained from water. Breaking the conversation, Plato addressed the tense situation I had created, and we engaged in friendly discussions about politics and baseball. Plato was a Yankees fan. Aaron and I rooted for the Orioles and Nationals. Ellie liked the Pirates, being from Jonestown. Simon served dessert, tiramisu. I skipped mine. Plato seemed to notice. Aaron insisted that Plato not skip dessert, encouraging him to eat. Plato commented on keeping his waist in check and mentioned Aaron having no fat in her body, claiming to have observed her while swimming and noting her preference for beer over water. In response to Aaron expressing a lack of trust, Plato dismissed the idea of being medicated with something forbidden, considering it crazy. He encouraged me to eat and drink while pushing a glass of water and tiramisu towards me. I smiled and offered the same to Plato. However, he sat with a stony face and instructed Simon to clear the table. Simon noticed the change in the water and dessert arrangement, picked up my untouched glass of water and tiramisu, and carried them away. Elle suggested moving to the courtyard for music and dancing. Aaron and Plato remained silent. I stood up and extended my hand to Elle, leading her to the patio. Once there, she remarked on my apparent suspicion of Plato slipping something into the food and water. I acknowledged the possibility, but noted that Plato hadn't taken either himself and had them removed by Simon. The others joined us, and soft music started playing. I approached Aaron, took her by the elbow, and led her away from Plato into the open area. We danced, and although Aaron was initially shy, she eventually relaxed. Pressing herself close to me, she whispered, "I love you, Donnie, always. I love you too, Aaron." We continued dancing. The music concluded, and we joined Plato and Elle at a table. Soon, the music resumed, and Elle rose, offering her hand to me. She led me to the dance floor. We danced. Elle might have been the world's most captivating distraction, with her sweet, subtle fragrance and the contours of her body. She entranced me, eliciting immediate delight, as she always did. Observing Plato's hands on Aaron's backside, I noted that she didn't push them away. Breaking away from Elle, I walked the short distance to Aaron and Plato, standing there and observing them. Aaron noticed and tried to move away from Plato, who persisted in keeping his hands on her. She gently pushed him on the chest, expressing a desire to avoid problems. Plato released her, but took her hand, guiding her back to the table. Elle returned after me, and we sat down, with her sitting very close to me. Aaron held Plato's hand as they sat side by side. Plato expressed disappointment in me, claiming that Elle was a fantastic lover and could provide me with one of the most powerful and delightful experiences of my life. He accused me of denying her this opportunity. I asserted that I had a wife and wouldn't entertain the idea of a trade, bringing us back to the initial discussion. Turning to Aaron, I stated that it was either him or me, with no intermediary options. She withdrew her hand from his, but looked at me and suggested that it was only for the weekend, and on Monday, everything would be back to normal. She asked if I couldn't have some fun with Ella for the time being. Scrutinizing her, I questioned if she was serious, and if I should take it as a yes or no, even if it meant it would be over between us. I firmly stated my refusal with a simple no. Despite not understanding why it should imply anything, I made it clear that I wouldn't entertain the idea. I extended my hand to her, and she took it. Pulling her towards me, I gave her the hottest kiss I could muster, running my hands up and down her body. Afterward, I pulled away, tears welling up in my eyes. I exhaled the words that nearly crushed me, stating, "The mere thought that you would agree to be with this guy means it's all over between us. It's done." I turned and headed for the stairs. She cried out, "No, Donnie, no!" I reached the top of the stairs, grabbed my previously packed bag, and left through the back fire escape. I made the call and ran into the darkness, sobbing. While running, I still heard screams. About 20 minutes later, I heard a plane. It landed near the southern dock, and my friend Todd Jacobs swam up to me. Approaching him with Plato and Simon emerging behind me, Plato exclaimed that there was no escape and suggested I stay to calm my wife down. Charging at me, I reached the pier. Plato, uncontrollable and unfit for a fight, splashed around in the water, shouting about firing me. Boarding the plane with Todd at the controls, we flew to a small lake near Dulles. A car was waiting for me there, and I paid Todd for the service. Heading home to Alexandria, the road was dark and desolate. Our house, too, was dimly lit. Upon entering, I surveyed the surroundings. Photos of us in happier times, pictures of our relatives. Shocked, I sat in a chair, gazing into space, and that's how I drifted off to sleep. At 8 in the morning, a car's sound outside woke me up. I peered out and saw Erin stepping out of a rental car. She carried her bag to the door, unlocked it, and went inside. I stood and observed her, and she stood motionless, gazing at me. She looked awful, probably no better than me. She expressed in her entire life she had never messed up like that and vowed never to do it again, not wanting to lose me. I shrugged in response. I confronted Erin, asking her what she thought would happen when she decided to let Plato use her. I questioned if she thought I wouldn't notice because of Elle. She admitted to being stupid and not anticipating the consequences. I inquired if Erin and Plato had set everything up, and she looked down, confessing that Plato suggested there might be a substitution when they got there. She foresaw it in advance, thinking she would say no, but I surprised her by agreeing, with the condition that I go with Elle. She mentioned how much I seemed to desire Elle, and that the whole experience was intended as a sideshow to rekindle our marriage. I smiled in response. I questioned Erin about why she thought Plato would be better than me. She explained that he excited her, being older and stronger, and suggested that he knew what to do to win her over. She clarified that she never thought he would be better than me, just different. Concerned about the future, I asked how I could be sure this wouldn't happen again, considering there are many guys like Plato in the world, and he's still around. Erin insisted that she didn't mean to cheat and believed everything was right in front of me. She thought I would agree now, since I had turned down Elle. Expressing my disappointment, I remarked that she wasn't the woman I met and married, emphasizing that the woman I knew wouldn't succumb to the advances of another guy. Erin pleaded to see what happens next and suggested we continue enjoying great lovemaking while acknowledging that we both missed it. She stood up and removed all her clothes, prompting me to think about turning away but ultimately not doing so. She led me upstairs. The only constant in our relationship, always present and likely to remain, is our complete coital compatibility. I let her go home, and 10 years later, I picked up our kids from the school bus, Jessica, who is 8, and Robert, who is 6. Helen, who is 3, and doesn't attend school yet. As a stay-at-home writer, I had help and the opportunity to write. It took over a year before I trusted Erin enough to let her stop taking the pills, and when she did, our lovemaking life flourished. The idea of her getting pregnant excited us greatly. I closed my contract with the previous publisher, and Sally and I moved on to something else. The first book I wrote was about adventures on an island, closely mirroring reality. It sold a considerable number of copies, securing a movie deal that included my 3 previous books. Plato couldn't complain about half-truths in the new book, where he was cast as Socrates and met a fitting fate. Erin now owns 2 stores that generate some income, while I earn substantially. Before fully accepting her back, Erin signed a postnuptial agreement, ensuring fidelity from both of us. With the school year underway, as I drove the 2 older kids home, a small red sports car arrived at our entrance. A remarkable pair of legs emerged, followed by the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. The children excitedly ran up to her shouting, "Aunt Helen!" She hugged them and fussed around, while young Helen welcomed her at the door. I poured her favorite drink, seltzer, and informed her that Erin would arrive soon. I mentioned preparing a high-calorie salad, concluding with, "But that's a completely different story." I'm Donald, aged 56, sharing my life for the first time. I'm married to Lauren, aged 45, and we have a 13-year-old daughter. This recount is from a few months ago. My wife, our daughter, and I were in Istanbul with a large group of 3 families, totaling around 16 people. As our trip concluded, we gathered at Istanbul Airport for our collective return to Chicago. With an 11-hour flight ahead, we conducted a group accounting session. Unexpectedly, our flight faced a 6-hour delay. Utilizing the time, we all headed to the lounge, finding it surprisingly empty. We were the sole occupants, engaging in lively conversations, sharing smiles, and reliving tales of Turkey and its delectable cuisine. Taking a brief smoke break, I returned after 15 minutes, walking towards my wife. Spotting a slender figure near her, my heart raced, not due to nicotine, but an intense surge of emotions. The closer I got, the more my heart raced, transporting me back 2 decades to a moment of holding hands in a church, saying, "I do," and embarking on a shared life. Suddenly, I snapped back to the lounge, informing my wife of my need for fresh air before walking out without acknowledging the woman talking to her. Outside, memories flooded back, bringing me to moments with Maria in Columbus, Georgia, by the Chattahoochee River. Closing my eyes, I revisited our love story from college to marriage. Maria, my life, has been the object of my affection since our college days. We married, moved in together, and embarked on a promising married life. My journalism career and her role as a financial expert led to frequent travels, yet we maintained our connection. Maria's sparkling eyes brightened my days, and when at home, our time was filled with love and delicious meals she prepared. The initial 2 years of marriage were seamless, with no signs of trouble in paradise. We postponed having children to establish ourselves professionally. Our only challenge was the limited time we could spend together due to our demanding jobs. Travel became a constant, even for Maria. The sole point of contention was my mother, living alone and desiring frequent visits. My wife harbored a dislike for her, and although I never probed the reasons, I endeavored to keep them apart, maintaining a delicate balance between them. In January, my mother became ill, and I informed my wife that I would care for her. She wasn't pleased, since I had just returned from covering a story in Iraq. We argued because she wanted me to hire help for my mother instead of going myself. I explained that my mother is old, and this might be the last time I see her alive. Maria was unhappy, but I ignored it. 3 days later, my mother died in my arms, leaving me devastated. After her burial, I returned home, and Maria once again complained about my mother. I was shocked and couldn't understand her point. She caused so much trouble, insisting that the deceased person should have been in the hospital from the start. I remained silent, trying to comprehend it all. "Why is Maria criticizing a deceased person?" I retorted, but she shut me down, saying the person won't respond, so I should zip it. That led to a week of silence between us. To break the ice, I took her out for dinner, and that night, we shared a closeness moment. Things seemed better, but I had to go to Afghanistan to cover the historic Silk Road. In my absence, Maria earned promotions and a higher salary. When I returned 2 weeks later, everything had changed. Coming home, Maria greeted me warmly, but during dinner, she seemed tense. She said we needed changes in our lives. "What changes do you want?" I asked. She expressed the challenges of my frequent and prolonged absences, longing for my touch. Maria gave me 2 options: find a job near her, or find her a job to travel with me. Torn, but relieved by her honesty, I agreed to find another job, closing the topic. The next morning, I resigned and got a local job at the TV channel, even though it paid less. When I told Maria about the 30% reduction in my salary, she was angry. I explained the trade-off for a stationary job, but she resisted, upset about the decreased contribution and its impact on her lifestyle. It was a tough situation, but I was committed to making it work. We continued like that, and over the next 3 months, things deteriorated. We talked less, and nights lacked lovemaking. Her demeanor shifted from a loving wife to a nagging presence. She found faults in everything, and not a single day passed without going to bed angry. It got so bad that one night she asked me to stop breathing as my breath disturbed her sleep. A few days later, my phone went missing, prompting me to use my wife's phone to call mine. Surprisingly, her phone was locked, which was unusual since I never had a lock on mine, and she never did either, as far as I knew. This raised suspicions about why her phone had a lock. Was she hiding something? On a Thursday night, she returned from a late-night party with her office friends, appearing disheveled in a black dress with no lipstick. When I asked what happened, she explained she danced too much and was tired. Helping her to the bedroom, I noticed a bruise on her left thigh, and she wasn't wearing panties, which was out of character for her. Unable to sleep that night, I became determined to uncover the truth. As a journalist, my instinct was to investigate. Although I knew many people who could assist, I preferred handling it on my own. 3 weeks later, I found myself outside Motel 6 on Victory Drive at 2:30 p.m., having tracked Maria's car there. Approaching room 12, I unlocked the door and discovered a monitor displaying my wife in a compromising position with her blonde lover, Steve Bowman, an old college foe who had always admired Maria. My tears had ceased, leaving me emotionally numb. The pain in my heart was overwhelming after 3 weeks of relentless investigation. Breaking the door and acting impulsively crossed my mind, but I had promised the motel manager no violence, a condition for his assistance in setting up recording devices in the room. Despite the manager's restriction, violence remained an option outside the motel. I left the motel with a smile, got into my car, and parked behind Steve's Mustang. Armed with an ice pick, I punctured all 4 tires, patiently waiting for what would unfold next. After an hour, Steve emerged, holding Maria by her exposed waist, an image I captured on camera. I returned my camera to its place and stepped out of my truck, approaching them directly. Maria remained silent, appearing as if she had seen a ghost, while Steve wore a sinister grin, reveling in taking another man's wife. Keeping his grip on her waist, I observed Maria's feeble attempt to free herself. Upon noticing me, she greeted and questioned my unexpected presence. I stared back, not uttering a word. In an effort to explain, she insisted that she could clarify, emphasizing that it wasn't what I might be thinking. In response to her explanation, my retort came with my gaze fixed on Steve's hand on her waist, stating that I was not thinking, just observing. With a smile, I made a remark, suggesting that Steve might have taken away my wife. Maria denied any wrongdoing, explaining that their interaction was part of a meeting they had at that location. My response was cynical, pointing out that the meeting seemed to involve unconventional activities. I asked if Steve had satisfied her, prompting a gasp from Maria as she recalled her recent words. A warning followed, stating that all her actions were on video and would be sent to her office, reaching friends, family, Linda, and her dad. Steve interjected, shouting a plea to leave Linda out of the situation. Dismissing his request, I added that Linda had every right to be involved since her husband was involved with my wife, creating a lot of unfinished business. Maintaining a smile, I continued, mentioning that Linda had already witnessed their actions and was eagerly awaiting the video copy to file for divorce. I suggested that, in their situation, preparing to say goodbye to their beloved Mustang might be wise, as it would be sold to settle the lawsuit. Furious, Steve lunged at me, a big mistake considering my years of travel to places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I had been among warriors and fighters, learning a few tricks along the way. Blocking his right hand, ducking forward, I landed a left on his chin, causing him to drop like a bag of potatoes. He struggled to get up, wobbling towards me, only to receive an uppercut that left him unconscious. Maria stood there horrified, and I instructed her to get in the truck. We didn't go home. Instead, we headed straight to my lawyer. Ignoring Maria's inquiries, I gestured for her silence. In the lawyer's office, we were directed to the large conference room and took seats on opposite sides of the table. The atmosphere was tense until Ron Freeman, my lawyer, entered and handed an envelope to Maria. He explained the terms, stating that the divorce had been filed based on irreconcilable differences. There was no shared property, and the legal transfer of his mother's house hadn't occurred, so she couldn't claim it. He informed her that she would receive half the money from the joint account, which she could withdraw since she earned more. There was no alimony. Ron concluded the discussion and left the room. Maria clutched the envelope and directed her gaze at me. Breaking the silence, I warned her that if she contested the divorce, I'd alter the grounds to infidelity, ensuring widespread exposure of her infidelity on all social media platforms. I threatened to send the evidence to her office, leading to termination, and vowed to follow her if she fled to another city, making her life a perpetual fear of tarnished reputation. After she nodded in understanding, I stood up and left. Maria, however, spoke up, questioning if I wanted to know why she acted as she did. She explained that I desired a lifestyle she couldn't provide, seeking luxury without understanding the sacrifices. According to her, the blonde lover fulfilled those desires temporarily, but he was already married and merely seeking cheap entertainment. Maria questioned how long such happiness would last, anticipating a cycle of seeking new lovers. She concluded by pointing out my present situation with only an envelope in hand. Her parting words wished me a nice day. Months later, I encountered her in court during the divorce proceedings. We never exchanged words, only receiving the court's orders granting the divorce. Steve, her lover, never filed a complaint against me, as cameras in the parking lot would have shown him as the aggressor. I sent Linda the videos and evidence of Steve's infidelity, leading to their divorce, and rumors of Steve facing consequences from Linda's brothers. Linda's father, connected and vengeful, wanted to punish Maria, but Linda intervened. I changed jobs and eventually returned to my old position in a different city. Life moved forward, and at Istanbul Airport, I found myself a chief journalist with ample wealth, a faithful wife, and a wonderful daughter. Back in the airport lounge, my wife continued conversing with Maria for hours. Staying away, I observed their interaction, concerned about Maria's intentions. Later, I confirmed our departure time with airport officials. Boarding the flight after a challenging wait, I sat beside my wife, who displayed a different smile. Curious, I inquired about her discussion with Maria. She revealed she was expressing gratitude to Maria for her mistakes, which led her to find me. Surprised, I asked if Maria had disclosed this information. My wife clarified that Maria never mentioned me, but shared court orders and investigative materials found in the attic. When I asked about their conversation, my wife downplayed it, stating she listened to Maria's regrets about missing her ex-husband and her desire for a life like mine. I smiled, closed my eyes, and settled back into my chair.
Story 3.
I grew up in a small Louisiana town where the air was always heavy with the scent of jasmine and the occasional whiff of salty bayou. My family, though close-knit, had its share of secrets and burdens. We lived on inherited land, and while it carried generations of pride, it also bore unspoken expectations. My father and grandfather worked tirelessly in construction, crafting homes that felt as sturdy as their values. I, however, chose a different path, one they respected but didn't quite understand: nursing. In my late teens, I met Bonnie at a local festival. She was magnetic, with laughter that could cut through the humid Louisiana air like a cool breeze. We married young, against whispers that we were rushing. Her father, a well-off plastic surgeon, made it clear he doubted I was worthy of her. I was determined to prove him wrong. Our first years together were a blend of hard work and tender moments. While I toiled in the ICU, Bonnie's career blossomed in finance. We bought our first house, a modest but charming fixer-upper that I rebuilt with my father and grandfather. Life seemed as steady as the oak trees that shaded our front yard. Then, after years of saving and building, my father gifted us the sprawling home where this story begins, a gesture of trust that rooted us deeper into the land I once dreamed of escaping. But cracks began to form in the seemingly perfect picture. Bonnie started spending late nights at work, and I chalked it up to her ambition. Then came the girls' nights that stretched into early mornings. My instincts, honed by years in critical care, whispered that something was wrong, but I silenced them. I wanted to believe in her and in us, until the day everything unraveled. When chaos strikes, knowing what matters most is crucial. If someone collapses from cardiac arrest, you initiate chest compressions immediately, keeping oxygen flowing to the brain until a defibrillator can restart the heart. If there's bleeding, you stop it first. Worrying about a broken bone comes later. Prioritization saves lives. Yet as I sat on the patio, staring into the humid Louisiana evening, I felt utterly lost. For the first time, I had no idea what to tackle first. As a critical care nurse, my instincts had always been sharp. I could anticipate danger before it fully surfaced. That ability had saved countless lives. But somehow I had completely missed the slow disintegration of my own marriage, an 18-year commitment crumbling right under my nose. And at that moment, I didn't want to save it. I wanted to burn it to the ground. But clarity hit me like a cold slap. Revenge would only create collateral damage. I took another sip of beer, my gaze fixed on the backyard. The lawn stretched toward the bayou, framed by towering oaks and pecan trees. Landscaping was minimal. Louisiana had enough snakes without inviting more. The house, a sprawling 4-bedroom with a deep shaded porch, had been a wedding gift from my father and grandfather. Built by our family business, Fontenot and Sons, it sat on 8 acres of inherited land. Though I'd chosen nursing over construction, a decision that had disappointed my grandfather, he had still respected my path. Family had always been my anchor. Now, that foundation was cracked beyond repair. I spotted my sister Susan making her way across the yard from her nearly identical home next door. Lifting a hand to catch her attention, I braced myself. We needed to talk. She eyed my beer as she reached the porch. Starting early, huh? Then her gaze drifted to the cooler beside me. Stockpiling, I see. I'm off the rest of the week, I muttered. She knew how my schedule worked. Long shifts, then consecutive days off. Overtime had funded my boat, my truck, and all the little extras. She grabbed a beer and settled into the chair beside me. All right, what's going on? You told me to take the day off, so I assume it's serious. It is, I said. Bonnie's been cheating. Her expression shifted from skepticism to shock. Are you sure? Maybe it's a mistake? I exhaled. There's a video, no doubt about it. Her face darkened. Who sent it? Anonymous account. Pissed off 999. She clenched her jaw, fury rising. That cheating witch, who's the guy? I hesitated. If Rich ever did that to me, I'd ruin him. She growled. Then something clicked. Wait a second. When would Bonnie even have time? She's home almost every night, except for those rare girls' nights, and she carpools with Rich. She froze. Her face paled. Then it flushed deep red. They're screwing each other. I watched as she processed it. The fury in her eyes burned hot, but she swallowed back her emotions. I pulled her into a hug. I wanted to break it to you gently, I murmured. She stiffened at first, but after a deep breath, she exhaled and slumped against me. I had a couple of hours to absorb the shock before calling her. That buffer had kept me from grabbing a tool and making the situation worse. She pulled away, rubbing her face, then her usual fire returned. What's the plan? Confront them? I shook my head. We keep our heads, act normal. Kiss our spouses goodnight like nothing's changed. She frowned. I'm serious, I said. We don't let them know we know. We talk to a lawyer first. She inhaled sharply, still trying to process it. I smirked, aiming for levity. At least we know we haven't caught anything. Unless you have secrets, too. She shot me a glare. Hell no. But damn, now I have to think about that, she shuddered. You know me, I joke about being famous, but not in that kind of movie. She cracked open another beer. For the record, she muttered, Rich is getting nothing from me. I just started my period, and it's staying that way until we drop the hammer. Bonnie can deal with his sorry A. We also can't tell the kids. Not yet, I cautioned. She nodded. Where are they now? With Mom and Dad. I sent them over this morning. Dad's keeping the boys busy, and the girls are free to do whatever. No questions asked. By kids, I meant my 2 and her 3. Our children had practically grown up as siblings, their bond unshakable. Jason, my oldest, was 17. Susan's son Rob was just a few months younger. Her twins, Dave and Cindy, along with my daughter Deirdre, were all 16. 5 teenagers within 2 years had been chaotic, but we'd made it work. Rich had always been the hands-on dad and uncle. I was the one who took them out into the wild, fishing, hunting, camping. In the early years, we camped in the backyard. As they got older, we ventured deeper into the bayou. Eventually, our trips required 2 boats, so either Susan or Rich would come along. Rich had always called it getting into the wild, but over the past year, he started backing out, letting the boys take his boat while he stayed home. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. 3 weeks ago, I took a 6-day trip with the kids. 1 boat for me and the girls, another for the boys. We camped, fished, crabbed at night. It felt like a perfect family escape. Turns out Bonnie and Rich didn't care about family. Telling the kids would be the hardest part. We can't keep this from them forever, Susan admitted. But we have time, she exhaled. So what's next? I don't forgive cheating. Neither do I. Bonnie's done. But I need to make sure she doesn't take everything. As much as I'd love to feed her to the gators, I'm not going to jail, and she's not taking my kids. Susan leaned forward. We hit them where it counts. Money. Rich is about to learn what financial ruin feels like. I nodded. She had a strong case. But Bonnie? That could get messy. Courts favored mothers. Susan smirked. Our houses? They're in our names. Dad made sure of that before marriage. They can't touch them. I frowned. She might convince a judge to let her stay. Maybe, but she doesn't own it. She studied me. Didn't you 2 sign a prenup? Dad had insisted. At the time, I thought it was excessive. Now it was a lifeline. Bonnie's father, a wealthy plastic surgeon, had demanded one too. If either of us cheated, the guilty party walked away with just 20% of shared assets. No alimony, no spousal support. Louisiana law honored prenups. Her father thought I'd be the one to betray Bonnie. Ironically, it was his daughter who wrecked everything. Susan's expression hardened. I'm worried about that video. That stopped me cold. Who filmed it? And why? I muttered. 3 angles, no edits, and they never noticed. Susan's eyes darkened. Show me. I pulled up the file. She clenched her fists. Those sick fools. Hearing them laugh at us made her blood boil. Rich is done, she whispered. But we need to find out who sent this. I nodded. We wait. She sat in silence, then suddenly her shoulders trembled. The anger cracked, giving way to quiet sobs. I reached over, pulling her close, and for the first time all day I couldn't hold back my own tears. That night I wasn't drunk, but I'd had too much. A half-finished beer rested in my hand when Bonnie walked in. I greeted her with a hug, my mask firmly in place. I expected her to pull away, to rush for the shower. Instead, she kissed me. Hard. I inhaled, searching for cologne. Nothing, just her usual perfume. I took a slow sip of beer, my rage hidden beneath the surface. Dinner's ready, I said evenly. Bonnie hesitated, then sighed. Damn, I was hoping you'd eat something, and it wasn't food. Susan and I had already decided on takeout. Neither of us had the energy to cook, not without joking about poisoning our spouses. Dark humor kept us from losing control. The next morning, I stood by the window, watching as Bonnie slid into Rich's car for their usual carpool to work. My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. The game wasn't over yet. I picked up my phone and called Susan. How'd it go? I asked. Surprisingly smooth, she admitted. Almost lost my temper a couple of times, but sticking to the plan helped. Bet he's meeting up with Bonnie tonight. Any clue where? Susan was raw, angry, hurt, venting. Normally, she was a wild card, but right now, brutal honesty was all that mattered. By 10 a.m., we were sitting across from Jake, one of her firm's senior partners. Divorce was his expertise. You're positive this video captures both of them? He asked. We nodded, but kept the footage to ourselves for now. As long as your evidence is solid, that's all you need, he said, a smirk creeping onto his face. By the way, I reviewed your prenups. Damn, those things are ironclad. Can't believe you both signed without independent counsel. My father made sure I did, I said. Same with Susan and Rich. Jake let out a low whistle. If either of you had been the ones cheating, you'd be in serious trouble. But since they were the ones who strayed, they're looking at a 20% cut of the shared assets. No alimony, no claim on your income. Any loopholes? Susan pressed. Not many, Jake said. If Bonnie had personal accounts before marriage, like any leftover wedding money, she keeps that. But any money earned during the marriage and not disclosed to you, that's fair game. I leaned forward. What about home improvements? He hesitated. That's a gray area. Since the properties were gifted to you before marriage, they're protected. But major renovations, like your solar panels, could be considered joint expenses. A judge might rule that she's entitled to a portion of their value. I crossed my arms. She can take her 20% and whatever furniture she wants. Hell, she can carry it out herself. Jake chuckled. That kind of hassle might make her walk away with even less. Exactly, Susan said. But listen, do not leak that video, Jake warned. If it can be traced back to you, they could sue for invasion of privacy. I frowned. What if they recorded it themselves and it just ended up out there? Jake shrugged. Then that's their problem. But until you figure out how to use it strategically, keep it under wraps. Susan and I exchanged a look. We had considered exposing them to friends and family. The only thing stopping us was the kids. Now, though, we needed to figure out who had recorded it in the first place. We debated when to serve the divorce papers, Thursday or Friday. We settled on Friday. Let them sweat all weekend. Jake disagreed. Dragging it out just racks up legal fees. Plus, the sooner they get served, the sooner they're forced to submit financial records. And if their attorney even picks up the phone, that's billable. We considered having them served in person, maybe at lunch. A divorce decree with dessert. Jake smirked. Tempting, but bad optics. Don't escalate. Instead, we arranged for the papers to be delivered at work, right in front of their coworkers. After leaving Jake's office, we hit the bank. Within hours, we drained 80% of our joint accounts into new ones, paid off credit cards, and closed them. Their cars were already paid off, so there was no risk of repossession. Jake had emphasized the importance of keeping everything above board. No sneaky tactics. We followed his advice. At the bank, I checked my email. 3 new video clips of Bonnie and Rich. Same hotel room, same angles. I replied to the anonymous sender. Appreciate the info. How did you get these? Also, concerned about them ending up online. That last part was a lie. A twisted part of me wanted them to go viral, but I had to play it safe. An hour later, a response arrived. 9203 Victoria Street, apartment 201. I drove there immediately. It was an unassuming apartment complex. Nothing fancy, just functional. The receptionist at the front desk was no help. I think my brother-in-law is renting an apartment here for an affair, I said, leaning in. Blank stare. I just need to know if he's a tenant. Nothing. I sighed. I get it, you can't confirm anything. But here's the thing, he's got a record. Possible pill connections. Maybe human trafficking. Courtesans. Her expression changed. What exactly are you asking? She said warily. I smiled. I just need to know who's leasing apartment 201. 5 minutes later, I walked out with a printout in my pocket. For 2 years, the apartment had been leased by Bonnie and Rich's company, with Rich listed as the primary tenant. Someone had uncovered their little hideaway and blown the whistle. I wondered how their employer would feel about footing the bill for their affair. But that was a problem for later. At exactly 12:30 p.m., Bonnie called. It had been 30 minutes since she'd been served. I could only imagine the chaos. "What the hell do you mean you're divorcing me?" she demanded. I almost laughed at her nerve. Keeping my tone calm, I replied, "You found someone else. I'm letting you go." I didn't mention the videos. The plan was simple. Keep them off balance. Don't reveal our full hand. "Infidelity?" Bonnie scoffed. "Oh, come on. People gossip, sure, but Rich is my brother-in-law. Who told you this? Some jealous coworker?" "Yeah," I said coolly. "Something like that." She exhaled sharply. "If you follow through with this, you're the one moving out. I'll get custody, and you'll be paying child support. I'll take half of everything. Your boat, your truck. You'll probably have to sell them just to settle." I let her ramble. Mistaking my silence for hesitation, she continued, "I'm keeping the house, and you'll keep paying the bills. And since Susan served Rich, guess what? He'll move in with me. You can sit over there with your sister and wonder what we're doing in your bed." I took a steady breath. "Go ahead," I said evenly. "Call your lawyer." She had no idea what was coming. "Oh, and by the way," I added, voice calm as ever, "the kids are packing your things as we speak. Susan's handling Rich's. Everything will be on the front lawn this afternoon. Locks were changed this morning. We've already filed restraining orders, so you'll need to find somewhere else to stay." Bonnie started screaming. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Susan texted, "Backyard, bring beer, make sure it's full." I grabbed the cooler and stepped outside. Susan was already halfway through hers when I sat down. "That fool," she muttered, "tried to convince me it was just rumors. Told me, 'Baby, don't believe some secretary over me. Bonnie and I are just close.'" I smirked. Bonnie said the exact same thing. Susan shook her head. "If Rich were here, I'd hit him so hard, he'd be picking his teeth out of the grass." I took a sip of beer. I told Bonnie to pack her things and to call first, because I'll be answering the door with a loaded tool. Susan grinned. "Jake's sending 2 deputies over, just in case." "I don't need babysitters," I grumbled. "No, but Jake knows you, and he knows how close you are to snapping." She wasn't wrong. The deputies weren't for Bonnie and Rich. They were there to keep me from doing something I couldn't take back. My phone dinged. A new email. "Think it's from our mystery informant?" Susan asked. I opened it. An audio file. Bonnie's voice came through, irritated. "Can you believe Robert and Susan served us? They must have found out somehow. Just last night, Robert was all over me. If he hadn't been so drunk, I think we would have done it right there in the living room. And now this." "Relax," Rich replied. "They don't know anything. Not really. Someone probably saw us at lunch or carpooling. People gossip. No one has proof. We never touch in public, never act suspicious. Just deny, deny, deny." Bonnie sighed. "I'd love to leave town like we planned, but this is too soon. The kids are still in school, and we haven't secured the money yet." Rich sounded smug. "If they go through with the divorce, we'll make them pay. I have a frat brother who's a lawyer. He'll take our case. Just don't admit to anything. Assume everything is being recorded." The audio ended. Susan and I sat in silence. "So we don't know anything?" I said slowly. "Just rumors." Susan clenched her jaw. "They've been planning this for a while. He's had that apartment for years." I exhaled. "I'm more worried about the money. Rich made it clear they need to lock down their finances. We have to get ahead of them before they try something shady. Susan nodded, her eyes glistening. We have to stay strong. I know. Jake said your situation is worse than mine, I admitted. Courts favor women. If Bonnie fights for custody and stays in the house until Deirdre turns 18, I'm screwed. The prenup helps, but if I have to pay child support while she lives there for free, that's brutal. Susan hugged me as silent tears slipped down her face. There were no winners here. Divorce wasn't about winning. It was about surviving with as little damage as possible. Inside, the kids were quiet when they heard us enter. Deirdre and Cindy were shoving Bonnie's things into suitcases. When they ran out, they switched to trash bags. Take pictures before sealing them, I instructed. I didn't explain that I planned to deduct the cost of every suitcase and garbage bag from Bonnie's share of the assets. Every little bit counted. Next door, the boys were almost done. Rich had fewer clothes, and they weren't bothering to fold anything. They stuffed his things into whatever containers they could find. I smirked as Rob, Rich's own son, shoved a $2,000 suit into a trash bag like it was an old t-shirt. They had my back. For a second, I wondered if they'd cover for me if I pissed in that bag. I decided not to put them in that position. Just as we finished, my phone buzzed. A text from Bonnie. On our way home now. I called Jake immediately. 15 minutes later, he pulled up with 2 sheriff's deputies. Jake smirked. Relax and enjoy, he said when I asked if he was covering the cost. Bonnie and Rich arrived in his car. Another vehicle followed. Boudreaux, Landry, of course. Boudreaux had been a schoolyard bully since childhood, dumb as a rock, but somehow he scraped through law school. Now here he was. Hey, Robert, he called, stretching my name in his thick Cajun accent. I clenched my jaw. When my father said it, it was affectionate. From him, it made my skin crawl. I hear you got some trouble with your wife and brother-in-law, he said. Ain't no big deal. If I'd had a tool, I might have put a bullet between his eyes without blinking. But I knew better than to fight him. He was 6'3", 300 pounds. The best I could do was run until he collapsed from a heart attack and then kick him while he was down. Hey, Boudreaux, I said evenly. How's your mom and them? Good, good, he replied, then flipped the switch. The fake charm vanished. So you really think my boy Rich is screwing your wife? His grin told me everything. Rich had trusted him. Boudreaux had known all along, and he was here to gaslight me. Well, I said coolly, that's the story. Jake stepped in closer, sensing the tension. I exhaled. I'm not putting up with it. I dropped the Cajun act as fast as Boudreaux had. I wasn't playing that game. Bonnie stepped forward, arms crossed. You emptied our bank account. Yes, I said flatly. And I have the statements to prove how much was there. When we divide assets, you'll get exactly what you're owed. Bonnie glared. I didn't mention her credit cards were useless. She'd find out soon enough. Neither Susan nor I followed them inside. Instead, Deirdre and Cindy shadowed Bonnie, a deputy close behind. Jason and Rob did the same for Rich. Where's my jewelry? Bonnie demanded. I had expected that fight. I had bought her expensive pieces over the years. Tanzanite, emeralds, rubies, diamonds. I had them appraised a few years ago, worth at least $25,000. Now, most of it was locked away in my safe. Boudreaux opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when I snapped a photo of Bonnie's ring and necklace. Insurance records, I said, just making sure nothing mysteriously disappears. Bonnie hesitated, then handed them over after whispering with Boudreaux. So where the hell am I supposed to go? She snapped. I almost said, try your Victoria Street love nest, but shrugged instead. Just days ago, I had loved this woman. Now I felt nothing, not even anger, just nothing. Bonnie and Rich finally left. Boudreaux followed. I turned to Jake. Think they're heading to the apartment? Jake grinned. I hope so. I have someone tailing them. But they weren't that dumb. Instead of going to their hideaway, they checked into a Holiday Inn. I made a mental note to follow up later. That evening, Susan and the girls were making dinner when my phone beeped. Another email. She followed me to my room as I pulled up the file on my computer. The recording started playing. Boudreaux's voice came through first. You're probably being followed. That's why I told you to stay at a motel. Get a room with 2 beds. Make both look slept in. Investigators can bribe housekeeping to check. Tell them you're just sharing to save money. Rich scoffed. Yeah, well, my credit card got declined at check-in. That was fun. Good thing I pulled out extra cash, Bonnie muttered. Boudreaux continued. Start listing your assets. Robert's got the jewelry documented, so you won't get away with that. But if you have money or valuables he doesn't know about, hide them. Legally, it's community property, but what they don't know, they can't claim. Should we ask for a full list of the jewelry? Bonnie asked. No point, Boudreaux said. Robert's right. You'd just sell them off cheap and claim they never existed. If you've got gold or cash stashed, bury it. If you have a secret bank account, keep it small. Anything under your social security number is easy to track. Offshore accounts are safer. Just don't get caught hiding assets. If this goes to court, you'll have to swear you disclosed everything. If they catch you lying, that's perjury. A pause. Bonnie broke the silence. So what now? They can find our Baton Rouge accounts, Rich muttered. I thought we were safe using the office address. Screw that, Rich snapped. I'll be damned if Susan gets another dime. We need to call the airline, Bonnie said. See if we can get to the Cayman Islands tonight. We'll open an account first thing in the morning and transfer the money electronically. Too late to get cashier's checks now, Rich grumbled. I'll check flights. You handle the motel. Mess up the beds, wet the tissues, ruffle the towels, run the shower for a few minutes. Open the soap, pour out some shampoo, make it look real before we check out. The audio ended. Susan rubbed her temples. Do they really have secret accounts? Where's the money coming from? I see our bank statements. I know what we make. He couldn't stash enough offshore without me noticing. I felt the same frustration. Bonnie and I rarely used cash, and I reviewed every credit card statement. I told the woman at the apartment complex that Rich might be into pills and trafficking, I admitted. I was bluffing, but you don't think? Susan snorted. Rich? Mr. Straight-Laced? He wouldn't even know where to start. Then again, I never thought he'd cheat either. We couldn't do anything about potential hidden accounts yet, so we let it go for the night and joined the kids for dinner. The next morning, I stopped by a jeweler to get appraisals, then a tool dealer to document my firearms. I wasn't selling anything, just making sure everything was officially valued. The process cost me a new Glock, something I wanted anyway. Now Bonnie couldn't claim I was making unauthorized purchases. Susan finished work and met me at Jake's office. I played him the latest recordings. Jake shook his head. I'd love to know who's sending you these. How the hell did they bug a hotel room? A PI couldn't have moved this fast. Susan crossed her arms. Can we access their bank accounts? Not without a judge's order, Jake said. Even then, we have to find them first. Might take a PI. I'll have my guy dig around. No big withdrawals? Susan and I shook our heads. Then it's not worth chasing right now, Jake said. If they were stashing money, they've been doing it for years. Let's stay focused and get this divorce done quickly. Susan and I agreed. We wanted it over as soon as possible. In this state, divorce takes 6 months, Jake continued. But we can push for an early court date. Next week, we'll meet with Bonnie, Rich, and their lawyer to go over assets. Then we'll see a judge. Good news, this state runs on Napoleonic law. Probate's a mess, but divorce is fast, especially with proof of infidelity. I'll try to skip counseling, but some judges still require it. After the ruling, it's just waiting out the 6 months. Jake smirked. Oh, and Boudreaux called, wants you to release 30% more of the money you pulled from joint accounts. I rolled my eyes. Of course he did. I told him no, Jake said. Reminded him the prenup states the cheating spouse gets only 20%. Then I sent him a copy of the agreement. Susan laughed. Let me guess. He demanded proof of infidelity. Yep. Told him he'd get it in court. He wasn't happy, but he's out of moves. Jake leaned back, grinning. It's fun watching Boudreaux scramble. He's a stain on the legal profession. If I can slip an audio recording of him advising clients to hide assets into the courtroom, he won't get disbarred, but he'll sure as hell be humiliated. I hated being away from home, but I had to work that weekend. Sharon, the head nurse, had called earlier, saying she couldn't cover my shifts. What if I suddenly start coughing and need a COVID test? I asked. Would you find someone then? A-hole, Sharon laughed. Yeah, I could, but only for the weekend. We need senior staff, and I've got family stuff in Lafayette. My husband's already pissed I missed the last one. I get it, she added. If I found out my husband was cheating, I'd lose it too. You've got plenty of vacation and sick days. This qualifies as an emergency. Mental health counts as a sick day, right? How about this? I work the weekend and you start my vacation Monday? She exhaled. Really? You'd do that? You're saving me here. Yeah, well, you owe me. I do, she admitted. I'll start you on sick leave, then roll it into vacation. Take what you need. Just keep me posted. Honestly, work was a relief. Weekends in the ICU were unpredictable. Fewer scheduled procedures, but constant vigilance. The doctors only did rounds. We were their eyes and ears. Still, I wasn't expecting to see my father-in-law waiting at the nurse's station when I returned from rounds. I stopped. "Dr. Prejean, what brings a plastic surgeon to the ICU?" My voice was casual, loud enough for the nurses to hear. Most knew he was my father-in-law. The rest would soon find out. His expression was cold. "Cut the crap," he hissed. "We need to talk." Inside the head nurse's office, he didn't waste time. "What the hell is this about you kicking Bonnie out?" he demanded. "She called her mother last night, sobbing." I met his stare. "John, Bonnie is having an affair." I wasn't sugarcoating anything. It had taken years for this man to respect me, and he knew I didn't lie. "The worst part?" I continued. "She's cheating with my sister's husband. I'm dealing with a full-blown family crisis." John exhaled, shaking his head. "That's just office gossip. People talk because they commute together, have lunch together. You know how rumors spread. She told us before that people speculated she was sleeping with her boss, and that was nonsense too." I wasn't about to dump everything I had on him, but I knew being direct was best. "I haven't told anyone except my lawyer and Susan," I said. "Not even Bonnie and Rich know how much I know." I swallowed, keeping my emotions in check. "But I have proof, John. Video and audio, the kind that makes it undeniable." His face changed. His eyes widened. Real shock. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "What can I do?" I replied. "I'm trying to protect the kids. They don't deserve this. But I can't just let it slide." I leaned in. "John, what would you do if Bonnie walked in here with proof that I'd been cheating?" John didn't hesitate. "I'd want your head on a platter," he admitted. His face fell, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry, Robert, I had no idea." His voice was almost apologetic. He sighed. "I'll help Bonnie. I won't let her be homeless. But don't mistake that for excusing her. If you say you have proof, I believe you." I nodded. I'd expect nothing less. With that, he walked out. I felt worse for him than I did for Bonnie. That night, Susan shook her head when I told her. So, he finally realized his little girl isn't perfect. That had to sting. She took a sip of beer. "You know we have to tell Mom and Dad soon, right?" I nodded. "Tomorrow night, after my shift. We can't keep them in the dark." We both knew it wouldn't be easy. When we finally told them, my father asked one question. "Do you have proof?" I met his gaze. Undeniable proof. Like John, he was more focused on the kids than on us. I respected that. In our family, children came first. Adults dealt with their mess, but kids were never lied to. I hadn't received any new messages from my mystery source, but I already had enough. 4 videos, audio recordings, and proof this wasn't a fling. It was long-term planned and calculated. Bonnie hadn't just cheated, she had stolen from us. The Cayman Islands account still didn't add up, but just knowing it existed made my blood boil. Jake had started digging, running their social security numbers through financial databases. Even if the money was gone, we could subpoena the bank records. By Wednesday morning, we had answers. At Jake's office, we went over assets with a court-appointed financial auditor. I provided salary records and a pay stub I'd found for Bonnie. "She makes about $5,000 a month," I said, sliding the papers across Jake's desk. "With my overtime, we usually earn about the same by year-end." Jake nodded. "That's good for you. Even without the prenup, she can't claim alimony." On Monday, the auditor asked for tax returns. I had ours in a drawer and handed them over. Susan wasn't so lucky. "I have no idea where Rich keeps our tax records," she admitted. "They should be with everything else, but they're missing," Jake reassured her. "Rich makes around $80,000. You're at $50,000. You'll get a solid support payment." At noon, Boudreaux strolled into the conference room, followed by Rich, looking miserable, and Bonnie, radiating pure hatred. No regret, no apology. She had destroyed our marriage, yet she looked ready to curse me out. She stayed silent, though. Boudreaux must have told her to keep her cool. Rich, on the other hand, looked like he was barely keeping it together. Mr. Jacobs, the court officer, introduced himself and his assistant, who began recording everything. "Let's begin," Jacobs said. "You'll sign statements confirming that all information is accurate and admissible in court. Today's goal is to list assets and income. We won't discuss the prenuptial agreements. That's for later." He glanced at his paperwork. "For vehicles, we'll use Blue Book values. If a car is in your name but primarily used by a child, it's still considered yours unless both parties agree otherwise." He looked around the table. "Let's start with Mr. and Mrs. Fontenot." Going through vehicles, the boat, firearms, and household items took minutes. Even Bonnie's jewelry wasn't an issue. I had already appraised it, and its value exceeded my truck and tool collection combined. Then we got to the money. Jake presented checking and savings statements, including the withdrawals I made when I moved 80% of the funds. He did the same for Susan and Rich. Jacobs flipped through the paperwork. Everything looks standard, he said, then paused. Except for one issue, Mrs. Fontenot's reported income. There's a large discrepancy between her salary estimate and her tax returns from the last 2 years. Rich stiffened. I estimated her salary at $60,000, I said. Just multiplied her payroll by 12. Jacobs nodded. Yes, but her tax records show an income of $140,000 for both years. I blinked. My mind raced, but my mouth moved faster. What the hell? Jacobs' assistant frowned at my reaction. You didn't check your tax returns before filing? Jacobs asked. I shook my head. Bonnie and Rich insisted we use a new accountant, a client of theirs. Everything was filed electronically. I only checked the refund amount. Bonnie's face went pale, then red. Her base salary is correct, Jacobs continued, but she also received annual bonuses of $80,000, bringing her actual earnings to $140,000. I turned to Boudreaux, then to Bonnie and Rich, who looked just as blindsided. Jacobs wasn't done. As for Mr. Jenkins, he received $110,000 in bonuses for the same period. Susan stiffened. I didn't have our tax returns, but you got copies from their accountant, right? Yes, Jacobs confirmed. Susan leaned forward. So, how much extra money are we talking about? Jacobs adjusted his glasses. A total of $160,000 over 2 years. I turned to Bonnie, my voice cold. Where's the money, Bonnie? She hesitated, calculating her response, but I wasn't finished. That explains why you two flew to the Cayman Islands last Friday. You were trying to hide it. She opened her mouth, closed it, then snapped. What are you talking about? Realizing her mistake, she blurted, How did you find out? Are you following me? I smirked. Didn't have to. You did it yourself. Turning to Jacobs and the attorneys, I spoke clearly for the record. Years ago, Bonnie and Susan insisted we put locator apps on the kids' phones for safety. Turns out, they work both ways. Bonnie and Rich exchanged panicked glances. Last Friday, I asked Jason and Deirdre to call Bonnie. No answer. When they checked the app, she was offline all day. The other kids checked Rich's location, same thing. Then in the afternoon, they reappeared, near the coast. We checked flights into New Orleans and figured it out. I leaned back. Turns out you were in the Cayman Islands. Bonnie and Rich looked wrecked. They also stopped by your office Monday. You weren't there. The locator app showed you in Baton Rouge. I'm guessing that's when you moved the money. Jake cleared his throat. Boudreaux, you know we can subpoena those records. And you also know advising clients to hide assets offshore is illegal. He smiled thinly. Interesting timing. Your clients flew there just hours after hiring you. That's going to be a problem. Boudreaux's face turned beet red. I never suggested such a thing, he stammered, eyeing the court recorder and Jacob's assistant. Bonnie burst into tears. Even Rich looked rattled. Susan turned to Jake. Can we make them return the money? Jake nodded. We'll get our share, even if we have to garnish their wages. Once we prove infidelity, they'll owe the full amount. Bonnie lost it. But the money's gone, she shrieked. We tried to transfer it, and it disappeared. Rich motioned for her to stop, but she waved him off. I think he took it, she accused, pointing at me. I stared at her like she had lost her mind. I didn't even know about the money until now, I said. I suspected you were hiding something, but I had no idea how much. I leaned in. So what's your story? You spent it? Or lost it? Because both sound like nonsense. She shook her head frantically. We tried to transfer it at a bank in Grand Cayman, but the transfer was denied. That's why we went to Baton Rouge Monday, to figure out what happened. Jacobs folded his hands. Provide me with the Baton Rouge bank details. I can get answers faster than you can, and it will go on a record. As we left, Bonnie and Rich looked devastated. Susan turned to me. Where the hell did the money go? I shook my head. No idea. First, they had secret accounts. Now, it's all gone. Apparently, I muttered. Another mystery. Jake and Boudreaux expedited the case. I suspected Bonnie and Rich begged for it. They lasted a week at the Holiday Inn before moving into an apartment on Victoria Street. Probably their old love nest. The thought made me chuckle. Whatever money they had wasn't enough to keep them comfortable. And if Boudreaux charged high fees, they were in for a rough ride. For once, I almost wished for another message from my mystery source. But there was silence. All 5 kids insisted on being at the hearing, and I didn't argue. They had been just as affected as we were. They had every right to see it through. Before we entered, Jake gave us a rundown. Judge Guidry prefers a semi-formal approach. He doesn't sit on a raised bench. He stays at the table with everyone to keep things from getting too tense. Just follow my lead. We took our seats. Jake, Susan, and I on one side. Boudreaux with Bonnie and Rich on the other. The kids sat behind us in a loose formation. Judge Guidry walked in and we stood. He waved us down. "I keep things informal in family court," he said. "Speak when addressed, raise your hand if needed, and be respectful. If you piss me off, you're out. Understood?" The kids didn't even crack a smile. Flipping through his files, he said, "Normally these would be separate cases, but given the overlap, we'll handle them together." Bonnie shot me a glare, but I ignored her. "There's an infidelity claim," the judge continued. "In Louisiana, infidelity doesn't automatically dictate divorce terms, but prenuptial agreements do. If proven, they affect property division. That said, let's start with the financial discrepancies." Bonnie and Rich stiffened. "There are concerns about hidden assets," he said, his tone sharper. "Mrs. Fontenot and Mr. Jenkins had accounts in Baton Rouge, holding $120,000 and $160,000. My pulse quickened. We had them. "But," the judge went on, "the Monday before divorce filings, both accounts were drained." Bonnie went rigid. Rich swallowed hard. "Bank records show the correct passwords and security answers were used, so the transfers were authorized. No sign of fraud." Bonnie and Rich looked completely blindsided. The judge leaned back. "Now, here's where it gets interesting." Bonnie's eyes darted. "What do you mean?" He smirked. "Every cent of that $280,000 was split evenly into 5 accounts, belonging to Jason and Deirdre Fontenot, and Robert, Dave, and Cindy Jenkins." My jaw nearly hit the table. These accounts were set up years ago, likely as college or emergency funds. Under the Uniform Gifts to Minors Act, these transfers are legal and irreversible unless fraud is proven. I turned to Bonnie, who looked just as stunned. If the money had gone to our kids, why was she acting like she lost everything? The judge scanned the room. "Anyone have proof of fraud?" I almost laughed. I had hoped to recover what was mine, but this, their hidden stash ending up with our kids instead, it was poetic justice. Bonnie and Rich glared at us like we had orchestrated it, but we hadn't done a damn thing. One by one, we shook our heads. "No, Your Honor." Bonnie and Rich looked rattled. They had to be wondering if they had just crossed the line into financial crime. "Good," the judge said, flipping to the next section. "Now let's discuss custody." Deirdre raised her hand. "Yes, young lady?" She stood. "I read that in some states, kids 15 and older can choose which parent to live with." The judge nodded. "In Louisiana, a child's preference is considered, but I usually speak to them privately before making a ruling." Deirdre squared her shoulders. "I don't need a private meeting. My mom betrayed our entire family. I want to live with my dad." She placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. He stood. "Same here." Across the room, Robert, Dave, and Cindy stood too. "We want to live with our mom," Robert said, "for the same reason." I felt Susan tense beside me. I squeezed her hand. The judge studied them for a moment before giving a half smile. "Noted, but infidelity hasn't been legally proven yet." Deirdre raised her hand again. "Yes? I also read that at 16, I can petition for emancipation, and at 17, I can leave home without permission." The judge arched a brow. "That's correct. The law allowing 17-year-olds to leave was originally for military enlistment. Emancipation at 16 requires financial independence." Deirdre nodded. "I have a college fund and just received $56,000, not counting what was already in it." Cindy stood. "Same here." She glanced at Deirdre before turning back to the judge. "Between all of us, we have more than enough to be independent." Dave grinned. "We could rent a place and be fine." Jason and Rob exchanged looks, then stood. "If we pooled our money, all 5 of us could live on our own." I turned to the judge, waiting for his reaction. His lips twitched like he was trying not to laugh. "Let me guess," he said, rubbing his chin. "If I don't rule in your favor, you'll file for emancipation. And if you're 17, you'll just leave." All 5 nodded in unison. The judge sighed. "Sit down." His tone was more amused than stern. "Your opinions are noted." Shuffling his papers, he continued. "Now, infidelity usually doesn't impact divorce outcomes. But since both marriages had solid prenups tied to infidelity, we need evidence." Jake stood. "Your Honor, I have photographic proof of Richard Jenkins and Bonnie Fontenot engaging in sexual activity. Boudreaux shot to his feet. Objection. Those could be fabricated. The source is unknown. The judge glanced at Jake, then at me. Jake gave a nod. I cleared my throat. Your Honor, I don't know who sent the evidence. I received multiple video and audio recordings anonymously. The images were taken from those videos. Boudreaux smirked, thinking he had an opening. I continued. I hesitated to submit the full video, but I have a DVD and flash drive containing everything. I turned to Rich and Bonnie. They went pale. Judge Guidry caught their expressions. Do I need to play the video in open court, or do you acknowledge the infidelity? Boudreaux hesitated. He wanted to challenge it, but Bonnie and Rich had gone into full-blown panic. Bonnie burst out, "No, please don't show it." Rich nodded furiously. Boudreaux sighed. Your Honor, may I confer with my clients? The judge's sharp gaze pinned him. Are they denying the claim? Bonnie and Rich shook their heads. Boudreaux exhaled. No, Your Honor, we concede. The judge nodded. Then here's my ruling. Silence filled the room. Given the admission of infidelity, the prenuptial agreements stand. Just like that, Susan and I were awarded 80% of the marital assets. The judge advised us to settle property division through our attorneys unless we wanted the court deciding for us. Then he turned back to custody. Given the circumstances, full custody of Jason and Deirdre Fontenot is granted to Robert Fontenot. Full custody of Cynthia, Robert, and David Jenkins is granted to Susan Jenkins. The non-custodial parents will have full visitation rights. Bonnie and Rich sat in stunned silence. And regarding child support, Bonnie Fontenot will pay Mr. Fontenot $1,000 per month for 3 years. Richard Jenkins will pay Mrs. Jenkins $2,000 per month for the same period. Additionally, each non-custodial parent must contribute $500 per month per child until they turn 18. A deep sense of satisfaction settled over me. Susan leaned in. They got screwed. Jake, however, shook his head. Not enough. We could appeal. I met Susan's eyes and shook my head. This is fine. She raised a brow but nodded. We had won. That was all that mattered. As we left, Jake arranged a meeting to finalize the property split. I told the kids to go home, change, and wait. We needed a family talk. At the back of the courtroom, my father was waiting. So, when did you figure it out, Dad? I asked. Susan frowned. It clicked when Deirdre and Cindy made those comments about the video, he said. Susan still looked confused. Pissed off 999, I said. It was them, the kids. Her mouth dropped open. No way, Dad nodded. I suspected when I checked an old credit card bill. Jason and Rob wandered over, listening. 2 months ago, these two asked to use my card for an anniversary surprise. Said it was only $500. What did they actually buy? I asked. Dad sighed. I checked. The charge was at an electronics store. The bugs, I muttered. Dad nodded. They wouldn't tell me much, but once I explained the card was in my name and the billing and shipping addresses didn't match, they spilled. So they spent $500 on phone bugs? Susan turned to Jason and Rob. Apparently, Dad said, and I still have no idea where they got the cameras. He followed me home, eager to hear the full story. All 5 kids were already waiting in the living room, falling silent as we walked in. Kitchen, I said. We talk at the table. Susan grabbed beers for Dad and me. Jason and Rob smirked, holding out their hands. You might be old enough to spy, but you're not old enough to drink, I said dryly. They shrugged. All right, I said, sitting down. Who's starting? Deirdre took a breath. From the beginning. She glanced at Cindy before continuing. It started when Cindy and I dropped by Mom's office one afternoon. She wasn't there. Neither was Uncle Rich. This was during phase 2 of lockdown. We figured we could hit them up for movie money, but the receptionist said they'd left hours ago. So we checked the locator app, Cindy said. The one they made us install? I nodded. It showed them at some random address, she continued. So we went to check. It was an apartment complex. Uncle Rich's car was outside, so we waited. They came out later, Deirdre said tightly, holding hands, laughing, acting like a couple. She exhaled sharply. That's when we started tracking them. 3 days in a row, they went back to the same apartment, always for about an hour and a half. Sometimes late at night, after work, but before heading home. We told the boys, Cindy added. Rob leaned forward. That's when we started researching surveillance equipment. We found bugs that turn a phone into a live mic. Runs in the background, doesn't interfere with calls. Drains the battery faster, Jason noted. We convinced Pop to let us use his credit card to buy them, Rob admitted. Sorry for lying, Pop. Dad waved him off. Installing them was easy, Rob said. We took turns listening and recorded anything important. I nodded. That explains the audio. What about the video? And how'd you figure out which apartment was theirs? We checked their keys, Deirdre said. Both had one labeled 201, not an office number. So Jason took Mom's key and made a copy, Cindy added. Susan gasped. You broke in? Not broke in, Jason corrected. We inspected. I pinched the bridge of my nose. We went inside a couple of times, Deirdre admitted. We knew we needed cameras. So we bought a few, Cindy added. And a small transmitter, Dave grinned. That part was cool. He was excited, completely ignoring the fact that he was describing the takedown of 2 marriages. Deirdre continued. The cameras were motion-activated, so they didn't drain the batteries too fast. The receiver was hidden under the couch. It stored footage and sent it to our home computer. We recorded everything, Rob finished. I exhaled. So let me get this straight. You installed cameras, recorded video, captured audio, and then anonymously sent it to me? They exchanged looks. Yes, Deirdre admitted. I took a deep breath. These were my kids, my nieces and nephews. I couldn't explode no matter how reckless this was. But there was still one more issue. Let's talk about the money. Deirdre squared her shoulders. When Cindy and I first went to that apartment, we found Mom's stuff there. Clothes, makeup, towels. We knew what was happening. They'd clean up after their workouts and go home to you and Aunt Sue like nothing was wrong. We were furious. They weren't just cheating you, they were cheating us. She took a breath. The secret bank accounts were a side discovery. When we searched the apartment, Cindy said, we found bank paperwork, login instructions for an online account. It took time to track them, Deirdre admitted. We even checked Dad's files a couple of times, and we found more in Aunt Bonnie's office. Cindy smirked. The receptionist let us in a few times. We just waited. I rubbed my face. And the passwords? Aunt Bonnie kept a notebook in her purse, Cindy said. Had all her passwords. We tried a few, Jason said. And bingo. They used the same password for both accounts, Rob added. When we saw how much money they had hidden, Jason said, we were pissed. Were they stealing? Embezzling? We had no clue. Dave cleared his throat. I was the one who suggested moving it. Everyone turned to him. He blushed. It seemed fair, Jason shrugged. We read how divorce splits money, and we didn't want them keeping any of it. We already had accounts Pawpaw set up for us, so we figured, why not move all of it? I thought the cops might catch us, Deirdre admitted. But since it was technically our parents' money, we figured we wouldn't be in real trouble. The rest of us agreed, Cindy added. So we did it. If we had known about the 80/20ths prenup, we probably wouldn't have, Deirdre said. I leaned back, shaking my head. Honestly, it worked out better this way. Jason hesitated. Dad, we didn't want to hurt you and Aunt Sue, but we didn't know what else to do. So we sent the first video, Rob continued. We kept watching to see what you'd do. If you had grabbed a tool, we would have told you everything. Deirdre met my eyes. We just hope you're not mad. I turned to Susan, who had been speechless this whole time. Finally, I exhaled. I hope you kids never turn on me and Sue, I said, giving them a pointed look. Because if you ever pull something like this on me, I will find a way to punish you, even if I have to do it with a walker in a nursing home. They chuckled. You'll never have to worry, Daddy, Deirdre said firmly. You'd never betray us. We Cajuns stick together. Dad crossed his arms. One thing I don't get. You used my credit card for the bugs, but where'd you get the money for the cameras? Jason grinned. From them. I narrowed my eyes. Explain. Each camera was $500, video, sound, motion sensors. We got 5, plus a transmitter to send everything to Deirdre's computer. Total cost? $3,500 plus shipping. But we already pulled the cameras, Dave added. We can return them for half the money back. The phone bugs are probably lost, though, Rob admitted. Jason continued. As for the credit card, we used your Visa. I froze. I don't have a Visa. Jason shrugged. We do now. I applied in your name and forged your signature. At least he had the decency to look slightly guilty. $10,000 limit, Deirdre added. We bring in the mail, so hiding it was easy. Cindy grinned. We also made the pissed off 999 email. Rob came up with the name. Rob smirked. Because, well, we were pissed. Susan, Dad, and I exchanged glances. We were impressed. So the bugs in their phones still work? I asked. Dave nodded. Yeah, As long as their batteries are charged, we can hear everything. Everything? I raised an eyebrow. Well, he clarified, only when they're talking. It's voice-activated, so we mostly get car noise and business calls. We take turns listening and saving anything important. Susan and I exchanged another look. I want access to those audio files, I said. Dave grinned. Done. Because of that, we always knew Bonnie and Rich's next move. A couple of months later, Karma did the rest. They got fired. Rich had been using company funds to pay for their apartment. And Bonnie? Her bonuses had been way too high. Rather than a scandal, the company let them go quietly. Since then, they've barely called the kids, struggled with child support, and drowned financially. I should wish them well, but I don't.
Story 4.
I refused to keep paying my mother-in-law's rent while on maternity leave, and now she's trying to ruin my marriage and drive a wedge between my husband and me. Hi everyone, my name is Amy, 33, female. 5 years ago, my entire life fell apart. Let me start from the beginning. I met my husband, Jordan, 35, male, when I was on a trip to visit my friend Sarah, who lived in this beautiful little town. I remember it was the first week of July, and the weather was just perfect. Sarah had been bugging me for ages to come and stay with her, and I finally decided to take her up on the offer. Little did I know that this trip would change my life forever. Jordan lived right next door to Sarah's place. On my first day there, I was sitting on Sarah's porch, sipping iced tea and enjoying the sunset, when I saw him for the first time. He was out watering his plants, looking all calm and content. We made eye contact, and I swear I felt something shift inside me. You know that feeling when you just know something special is about to happen? That's what it was like. Sarah noticed my interest and told me that Jordan was a great guy but had been single for a while. She suggested I say hi the next time I saw him, which I did the very next day. I was on my way to grab a coffee, and there he was, sitting on his porch reading a book. I mustered up the courage to introduce myself, and we ended up chatting for almost an hour. We talked about everything, from our favorite books to our love for hiking. It was so easy to talk to him, like we had known each other for years. As my trip was coming to an end, I started feeling sad about leaving. On my last night there, Jordan and I went out for dinner. It was nothing fancy, just a cozy little restaurant by the lake, but it was perfect. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and what we wanted for the future. When he dropped me off at Sarah's place, we shared our first kiss. It was like something out of a movie, fireworks, butterflies, the whole shebang. After I got back home, we kept in touch through calls and texts. It wasn't long before we were spending hours on the phone every night, talking about everything under the sun. We decided to give long distance a shot, and for the next few months, we made it work. We visited each other as often as we could. He came to see me in my city, and I went back to visit him whenever I could. Those weekends together were the highlight of my life at the time. As time went on, the distance started to become more and more challenging. We were both miserable whenever we had to say goodbye, and it was getting harder to be apart. So, after about a year of long distance, I started looking for jobs in his city. I was lucky enough to find a great opportunity, and I decided to take the plunge and move there. The one thing in our relationship that I felt was weird was his relationship with his mother, Pam, 57, female. Now here's the thing about Pam and Jordan's relationship, they are very close. Jordan is a typical mama's boy, and Pam is one of those moms who don't think that anyone is good enough for their son. Her relationship with Jordan sometimes made me feel like the third wheel in our own relationship. One of the first instances that made me realize how close they were was when I had just moved in with Jordan. We had just settled into our new apartment and were still getting things sorted out. One evening, Pam showed up unannounced. She had a key to the place, which I didn't know she had, and walked in while we were having dinner. It was a bit awkward, to say the least. She started rearranging things in the kitchen, telling us how she thought it should be organized. I tried to laugh it off, thinking she was just being helpful, but it felt like she was trying to impose her way of doing things on us. Pam's opinions often seemed to carry more weight than mine. I remember when we were choosing furniture for our place, we found a beautiful couch that we both loved. But when Pam saw it, she made a face and said it wasn't practical and that we should get something else. Jordan agreed with her, and we ended up getting a different couch, one that Pam liked but I really didn't care for. It was frustrating because I felt like my opinions and preferences were being overshadowed by hers. After Jordan proposed, Pam almost became hostile towards me. While I was planning my wedding, she tried to take over and control everything, but I stood firm and was able to have the wedding of my dreams. Let me tell you, it was not easy. Pam was like a hurricane, sweeping through every aspect of our wedding plans, and I had to be the sturdy rock that stood in her way. Right after we announced our engagement, Pam started calling me every day with suggestions and ideas for the wedding. At first, I thought she was just being helpful, but it quickly became clear that she wanted to be in charge of the whole thing. She would say things like, "You should go with a traditional church wedding, Amy. It's what our family expects." Now, Jordan and I had already decided we wanted an outdoor ceremony by a lake, surrounded by nature. It was something that meant a lot to both of us, but Pam wasn't having it. She even went as far as to book a church and arrange a meeting with the pastor without consulting us. Then there was the issue with the dress. I had found the perfect dress, a simple, elegant gown that made me feel like a princess. But when Pam saw it, she wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, that's nice, but don't you think it's a bit plain? You should go for something more extravagant, like a ball gown." She actually took me to another bridal shop and tried to get me to buy a huge, puffy dress that looked like it came straight out of a fairy tale. It wasn't me at all, and I had to firmly tell her that I was sticking with my choice. She looked so disappointed, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into changing my mind. On the day of the wedding, Pam tried to take over the coordination of everything. She was telling the photographer where to set up, instructing the band on what to play, and even trying to rearrange the decorations. At one point, I had to take her aside and politely but firmly tell her that we had everything under control and that she should just relax and enjoy the day. It was tough, but I was determined to make sure that our wedding reflected who we were as a couple, not her vision. About a year after the wedding, Pam lost her job. She was working as a manager at a local store, and unfortunately, the store shut down. It was a tough time for her, and she was pretty shaken up. Jordan and I talked it over and agreed that until she could find another job, we would help her out with the rent. Pam's place wasn't too far from us, so it made sense to help her out rather than have her stress about finances on top of everything else. Pam started looking for a new job, but she kept complaining that it was hard to find one because of her age. She said, "No one wants to hire someone in their late 50s. They all want young people." At first, I felt really bad for her and tried to be as supportive as possible. I even helped her update her resume and coached her on how to answer interview questions. But after a few weeks, I started to notice a pattern. Every time she went for an interview, she would come back with a story about how the interviewer didn't seem to like her, or how the job wasn't a good fit because the company seemed too disorganized. She would say things like, "I can't believe how unprofessional these people are," or "I don't want to work for a place that doesn't have its act together." It began to feel like she was finding excuses not to take any job that came her way. A year passed, and Pam still hadn't been able to get a job. We were still continuing to pay her rent, and it was starting to really take a toll on our finances. But then, things changed in a big way. I found out I was pregnant. It was the happiest day of my life. I had always wanted to be a mother, and knowing that I was going to have a baby made everything seem brighter. Jordan and I were over the moon with excitement, and we started preparing for our little one's arrival right away. When I was about 8 months pregnant, I decided it was time to take my maternity leave. I worked in sales, and while I still received my basic salary during my leave, my main source of income was from commissions, which stopped as soon as I went on leave. This meant our income took a significant hit, and things got a lot tighter financially. We were managing. But it was clear we couldn't keep up with paying Pam's rent much longer without seriously compromising our own financial stability. As my due date approached, the stress of our financial situation started to weigh heavily on me. I was supposed to be focusing on preparing for the baby and enjoying this special time, but instead, I was constantly worrying about money. We had savings, but they were dwindling fast. And we needed to make sure we had enough to cover any unexpected expenses that might come up with the baby. We agreed that we needed to have a serious talk with Pam and let her know that we couldn't continue to pay her rent. We decided to have the conversation the next day. Pam came over for lunch, and after we finished eating, we sat down with her in the living room. I was so nervous, my heart was pounding in my chest. Jordan started by explaining our situation, how my income had decreased significantly, and how we were struggling to make ends meet. Pam listened quietly, but I could see her expression darken as she realized where the conversation was headed. When we told her that we wouldn't be able to pay her rent anymore, she got very upset. She said, "How am I supposed to survive without your help? I've been trying to find a job, but no one wants to hire someone my age." I felt bad for her, but I also knew that we had to prioritize our own family's needs, especially with a baby on the way. I tried to stay calm and explain that we had been supporting her for over a year and that we just couldn't afford it anymore. I suggested she look into other options, like finding a roommate to share the rent or even moving into a more affordable place. Pam was not happy about it. She said she couldn't possibly live with a stranger and that moving would be too much for her to handle. The conversation was tough, and it didn't end on a good note. Pam left in a huff, and I felt terrible. Less than a week later, Pam came to visit us again, and this time she didn't say anything about the rent. I thought we had moved past the whole issue. She seemed calm, and we had a nice chat about the baby and other lighthearted topics. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I was relieved that things seemed to be getting better. But then, after she left, something strange happened. Jordan got a call from her, and I could see his face tense up as he listened. He didn't say much, just a few uh-huhs and, okay, I'll be there soon. Less than 5 minutes later, he grabbed his keys and told me he had to go out for a bit. I assumed he was going to his mother's place, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe she needed help with something, I thought. Hours passed, and Jordan still wasn't back. I started to get worried and tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I sent him a few texts asking where he was and if everything was okay. All he responded with was a short message saying he wouldn't be home that night and that he'd explain everything later. My heart sank. I couldn't understand why he wasn't coming home or what could be so important that he needed to stay out all night. The next day, I had an important prenatal appointment. Jordan was supposed to accompany me, but he didn't show up, so I went alone. Everything went fine at the appointment, and I was looking forward to sharing the updates with him. But when I got back home, I was greeted by a shocking sight. My stuff was on the porch. Clothes, books, everything. There was a note taped to the door from Jordan. It said he knew I cheated and that he wasn't the father of the baby. My heart sank and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I tried to get inside, but the locks had been changed. How had he managed to do all this so quickly? It was like my world had turned upside down in an instant. I didn't know where to go, so I went to my friend Sarah's house. She lived right next to us, and I hoped she could help me figure out what to do. When I knocked on her door, she took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. She let me in, and as soon as I started telling her what had happened, she was just as shocked as I was. Sarah said she had heard some commotion earlier but hadn't paid much attention to it. She had no idea what was going on either. I tried calling Jordan, but he didn't pick up. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. Then, out of nowhere, I received a text message from Jordan. It was a picture of me standing at our front door with a man. I was smiling, and the guy was handing me something. I remember this guy. He was a colleague who had come over a few times to get my signature on some work document. Nothing inappropriate had happened. He was just a coworker. Who could have taken this photo? I was so confused and hurt. I texted Jordan, trying to explain that the man in the picture was just a colleague from the office and that nothing had happened between us. But Jordan didn't believe me. He just replied, saying he wanted a divorce and that he couldn't trust me anymore. It felt like a dagger to the heart. I couldn't believe it took so little to destroy our relationship. Trust me, I tried my best to explain everything and reassure him, but it was like he had already made up his mind. Something had changed in him, and he wasn't ready to listen to me at all. A few weeks later, I was still living at Sarah's house. I was trying to keep myself together, but it was hard with all the stress and uncertainty hanging over me. I did make plans to move back to my parents' place for a while to get some stability, but I couldn't travel right now because of how far along I was in my pregnancy. It just wasn't safe for me, or the baby. I needed help, so I asked my mom to come and stay with me. She flew in the next day, and it was such a relief to have her by my side during this difficult time. My mom helped me find a small apartment nearby. It wasn't much, but it was a place where I could start over. I used what little money I had saved to sign the lease, and my parents generously loaned me some money to help with the baby's expenses. They have been my rock through all of this, and I couldn't have made it without them. It was a humbling experience relying on my parents like this, but I was grateful for their support. I had to deliver my baby without my husband. My mom was there, but I still felt so alone. After a month, I was still trying to reach out to Jordan, texting him, sending him photos of our baby boy, and doing everything I could to make him believe that he was the father. I kept telling him that we could get a paternity test and that all I needed was a sample of his hair, but he wasn't even willing to try that. It was like he had completely shut me out. Then one day, out of the blue, he sent me divorce papers. I was furious and heartbroken at the same time. I didn't know what to do. I felt so helpless and abandoned. I didn't have any other option but to hire a lawyer. I thought, if Jordan doesn't want to accept his son, then fine. We don't need him. I was determined to move forward for the sake of my son. The lawyer was very supportive and helped me navigate the whole process. I decided to include a clause in the divorce papers, stating that Jordan was relinquishing his rights as a father. I was shocked when he happily signed the papers without any objections. It was like he didn't even care. Within a few months, we were divorced. Raising my son alone was really tough. There were sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and moments when I just felt completely overwhelmed. If it wasn't for my mom, who actually came to help out with the baby, my dad, who helped financially, and my friends, who helped me stay sane through it all, I would have lost my mind. My mom stayed with me for several months, helping with everything from feeding to midnight cuddles. She was my rock, always there to pick me up when I was feeling down, and to remind me that I wasn't alone in this journey. My dad was amazing too. He provided financial support, which was a huge relief. Being a single parent with a newborn and trying to make ends meet was incredibly stressful. But knowing that my dad had my back made it a bit easier to breathe. My friends, especially Sarah, were my lifeline. They checked in on me, brought meals, took me out for coffee just to get me out of the house. They kept me grounded and gave me the strength to keep going, even though things got really tough. However, despite all the support, I became deeply depressed when I found out that Jordan was already getting married. Yes, within a year of us separating, he was tying the knot with someone else. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't help but think that he was with this new girl while he was still married to me. It all started to make sense. Why he was so unwilling to listen to me when I tried to explain the truth about the situation with our baby. He just wanted a way out of our marriage so he could walk out on me and our child. It took me a while, but I finally managed to pick up the pieces of my life after everything fell apart. After Jordan kicked me out and filed for divorce, I leaned heavily on my parents and friends for support. They helped me find a small apartment where I could settle in with my newborn son. Financially, things were tough at first. I had to get back to work soon after giving birth. Despite the challenges of being a single mom, my parents helped out with childcare, and gradually, I was able to stabilize our situation. It was hard juggling work and motherhood, but every smile from my son made it all worth it. A few years down the line, I attended a work conference where I met Austin, 33, male. We hit it off instantly, but I was cautious after everything I had been through. He was patient and understanding, never pushing me to open up before I was ready. We started spending more time together, and before I knew it, I was falling for him deeply. Austin was different from anyone I had ever known. He was supportive of my past and was genuinely interested in building a future together. He treated my son as his own, which meant the world to me. After dating for a while, we decided to take the next step. Last year, we got married at a beautiful outdoor ceremony hosted at a friend's property. It was an intimate affair with close friends and family. Walking down the aisle with my son beside me and Austin waiting at the end was a moment I'll cherish forever. It felt like we had finally become the happy family I had always dreamed of. Since then, life has been good to us. Austin and I continue to support each other through thick and thin. He's been a wonderful father figure to my son, and seeing them bond melts my heart every day. We've created a loving, stable home where my son can thrive, and I couldn't be more grateful. Last month, out of the blue, I received a text from Jordan. Honestly, seeing his name pop up on my phone brought back a flood of emotions, anger, hurt, and a touch of curiosity. I didn't respond and immediately blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it, but then things took an unexpected turn. A few days later, I heard a knock on my door. To my shock, there stood Jordan. I hadn't told him where I lived, so I had no idea how he found me. He asked to talk, saying he just wanted a few minutes of my time. I was hesitant, but eventually I let him in, setting a strict time limit. Jordan started by saying he wanted to see our son and be a family again. My initial reaction was disbelief. After everything that happened, being accused of cheating, getting kicked out, and then the divorce, it was a lot to process. I was shocked and honestly pretty angry. I reminded him of everything he put me through, accusing me of cheating, kicking me out, and then divorcing me. I told him our son already has a father, my husband Austin, who legally adopted him after we got married. Jordan didn't take this well at all. He argued that Austin is just a stepdad and not our son's real father. Things got heated, and I had to remind Jordan that he willingly signed away his parental rights during our divorce. He got even angrier and refused to leave, insisting on meeting our son. I felt so cornered that I threatened to call the police if he didn't go. Eventually, he left after banging on the door for a while. Since then, Jordan has been bombarding me, my mom, and my friends with calls and messages. I'm feeling overwhelmed and unsure of how to handle this situation. It's like he's trying to force his way back into our lives after abandoning us. Has anyone here been through something similar? Any advice on how to handle Jordan's persistence without putting my family's peace at risk would be greatly appreciated. Thanks in advance for your help. Update 1. Hey everyone, I wanted to update you on what's been happening since I last posted. First, thank you all for your support and suggestions. It really means a lot to me. After Jordan showed up unannounced and started harassing us, I decided to seek legal advice. I contacted a lawyer and explained the whole situation to her. She assured me that legally, Jordan has no rights to my son. She explained that because my husband, Austin, legally adopted my son after we got married, Jordan's rights as a biological father were effectively terminated when he willingly signed away his parental rights during our divorce. It was a huge relief to hear this from a legal professional. She also advised me on steps I could take if Jordan continued to harass us. She said we could pursue legal actions such as getting a restraining order or taking other measures to ensure our safety and peace of mind. Armed with this information, I feel more confident about handling the situation. I know now that legally, my family is protected, and I don't have to entertain Jordan's attempts to disrupt our lives. After I told Austin about it, he was understandably concerned and told me never to open the door if Jordan came by again. He's worried about Jordan's behavior, and honestly, so am I. Curiosity got the better of me, though, and I did a bit of social media digging. Turns out, Jordan is divorced now. I'm not surprised, to be honest. Starting a new relationship on the back of another one rarely ends well. Since that incident, Jordan hasn't stopped with the texts and calls. It's all he's been doing, constantly trying to reach out to us. It's frustrating and unsettling, but for now, it's just been limited to that. I'm keeping Austin informed about everything, and he's been really supportive. We're both on the same page about not engaging with Jordan and prioritizing our safety and peace of mind. If Jordan escalates things further or tries anything else, I'm prepared to take legal action to protect my family. Update 2. Hi guys, I have another update for you. I'm feeling really shaken right now. I was at the park with my son earlier today, just enjoying some time outdoors, and then, out of nowhere, Jordan showed up. I couldn't believe it. At first, I froze for a moment, not sure how to react. Jordan approached us and tried to talk to my son. I immediately stepped between them, shielding my son from Jordan. I told him firmly to leave us alone, and that he had no right to be here or to approach my son. Jordan was persistent, though. He started saying things like how he wanted to see his son and be a family again. It was incredibly unsettling to hear him talk like that after everything that's happened. I could feel my heart racing, and I was scared about what he might do next. I tried hard to stay calm but firm. I told him that if he didn't leave immediately, I would call the police. I could see the shock and anger on his face, but I didn't back down. My priority was protecting my son and ensuring our safety. After what felt like an eternity, he finally backed off. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, but he kept looking back at us as he left the park. I stayed there for a while, just trying to process what had happened and calm my nerves. When I got home, I immediately called Austin and told him everything. He was furious and worried, but he reassured me that we would take whatever steps necessary to keep us safe. He insisted that I should have called the police right then and there, but I was so caught off guard that I didn't think of that. Now, I'm feeling scared and anxious about what might happen next. Jordan's behavior is becoming more unpredictable and aggressive, and I don't know how to handle it. I'm seriously considering getting a restraining order to protect my son and myself from any further encounters. Update 3. Hi everyone, I wanted to give you all an update on what's been happening with Jordan. It's been a roller coaster, but I think things might finally be settling down. After the incident at the park, where Jordan showed up unexpectedly, I realized I couldn't keep living in fear of him. So, I made a decision. I sent him a firm text message and told him that if he wanted to see his son, he needed to get a lawyer, and we could discuss things through legal channels. I didn't want any more surprises or confrontations. I also made sure to have my lawyer with me when we met. Austin was there too, standing by my side. It was important to have that support. When Jordan and his lawyer arrived, we had a serious discussion. My lawyer clearly laid out the situation. Jordan had no legal rights to my son. She made it clear that any further attempts to contact me or my son would result in legal action, including involving the police if necessary. I think the formality of the meeting and the strong stance from my lawyer might have finally made Jordan realize the seriousness of the situation. Since then, he hasn't tried to contact me again. It's been quiet, and for that, I'm incredibly relieved. Of course, I'm still cautious. I don't know if this saga with Jordan has truly ended, or if he might try something else in the future, but for now, I'm taking it day by day and focusing on moving forward with my family, Austin, and my son. I want to thank you all for your support throughout this challenging time. Your advice and encouragement have meant the world to me.